Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Voltron Online podcast. This is going to be a episode of a brand new podcast from the same podcast crew that brought you the Avatar Online podcast and also the Movers podcast. So this is of course going to be episode 1, and this is going to be our spoiler cast for Voltron Legendary Defender season 1, or season 1A as people are calling it. We're recording this podcast on July 17th, 2016. I'm going to be your main host for this podcast, Morgan Airspeed Prime, site super moderator for Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com, the site that's hosting this podcast. Joining me on the podcast first is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
And also joining us is Kelly, Gemini530 from the site.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. So before we get into the spoilers, we'll just briefly mention that if you're looking for more of our kind of general non-spoiler opinions on Voltron Legendary Defender, an episode of the Movers podcast that we did relatively recently, I think just 2 weeks ago, or maybe was it last week? I can't really remember. We discussed the first 1 hour long episode, Rise of Voltron, in detail, and kind of more covered our general thoughts as a way to recommend the show to others. So if you want kind of our basic thoughts on the show, check out that podcast. Just on the site, you can go to the podcast section and find the Movers podcast episode 36, I believe it is, and it's obviously titled Voltron Legendary Defender. But for today, we are here to talk about our more specific thoughts, because if you have listened to that podcast, you will know that we really struggled and mentioned so many times, but we can't talk about that. I had to do a couple of edits on that podcast to remove a couple of things that we did say, but thankfully we did remain spoiler-free eventually. So yeah, this is the first of some occasional podcasts we'll do for Voltron Legendary Defender. This is not going to be super regular. We'll do this one. We'll probably cover the San Diego Comic-Con panel next week. And then, like, whenever like a big season 2 trailer comes out, we'll probably cover that. Maybe a speculation show closer to release, and then we'll cover some of the season 2 stuff. But really won't be regular. The regular shows that we're going to be doing are still going to be the Avatar Online podcast and the Movers podcast. But we all really like this show, so we're going to do a little bit more coverage of this than most. So let's get into some opinions here, and we'll just start off with kind of, now that we are able to talk about it in more depth, overall, how do we feel about Voltron Legendary Defender so far? Greg, why don't you start us off? Now that we've kind of rewatched it, looked at everything a bit more, how exactly do you feel about the first kind of half of the first season of Voltron?
Overall, I still like it. I mean, I don't think my opinion has changed too much just from watching maybe the first episode or first special to watching the whole thing. I mean, overall, I really liked it. I like how it sort of ended with this sort of cliffhanger, which is good and bad at the same time, because of course you want to watch more of it, but you have to wait a little bit more. But hopefully we'll get some more information on that really soon from SDCC. But no, overall, I really liked it. I think it had a good, arc for the characters from what we saw. I mean, there are still some points where I would like to get a bit more information, but when you do watch more of the actual overall show, you do get little hints about the characters' arc and their. So I think that was done pretty well.
And Kelly, what about you? What are your general thoughts before we get into specifics?
Not much has changed, considering, like, I had seen it. I actually rewatched it a little bit, like, earlier than, like, just doing this podcast, just for the sake of it. And I was thinking about it when we were doing our non-spoiler podcast of it. So not my thoughts haven't changed too much. I still really like it a lot. I watched it the second time and I see like room for like improvement, I guess. Like, it's not a perfect show by any means, and I'd like to talk about the things that I thought could have been done better, but that doesn't mean like I disliked it. I still had a lot of fun with it, and I still think like season 2 could be really, really awesome, and yeah, I want to talk about it.
Yeah, for me, rewatching again, I actually rewatched the whole show during the week to prepare for this, because my first watch of the show was very kind of disjointed because there was a lot going on, but watching it more kind of cleanly straight through, you definitely noticed a couple of moments of setup for some of the key plots that kind of present you information before you get like reveals, and that stuff came across a little bit better to me overall. And yeah, just in general, I did like it a lot more. I still think there are some problems with the kind of pacing really early on, and the show definitely hasn't hit its like full stride yet. But where we end off the show is getting really good, and it's a very frustrating place to end off because it had just hit the point of becoming like excellent, and then it's over. So it's going to be interesting to kind of discuss here and take some and do some speculation stuff as well. So yeah, let's from here. What we're going to do for the rest of the show is basically bring up talking points, plot points from the season, and kind of go through them in detail, discuss them. We're probably going to jump around all over the place and not really go in order, but it should make it interesting to focus in on what we're going to be doing here. So, Greg, I suppose, why don't you kick us off with our first spoiler talking point?
Okay. Let's see which one of my points do I want to talk about. Okay, I guess I'll go with one of the things I thought was pretty interesting of the show overall, and I guess it's sort of like the power or the energy force, but quintessence and its actual sort of purpose, or what we think its purpose will be when we finally get the full reveal from like the little hints we get from like it healing Keith's hand, and just how it's powering up everyone and everything. So just quintessence, I guess, in general.
Yes, quintessence is really interesting what they present to us about it. Obviously, there's one episode that focuses fairly almost exclusively, the second last episode, on the difference between normal quintessence and Galra fuel, which is kind of quintessence altered by the Galra druid's magic, and how that's kind of like different, but it kind of does similar things, but it's different. And then like there are various other points during the season where we see stuff like the druids basically channeling like the life energy out of planets and living things to create quintessence. That's their like unique way of harvesting it, which like Karan makes a big point, like, wait, they found like this unusual way to harvest quintessence, and that's kind of why they're so powerful, because they can get so much of this so quickly. It seems to have some sort of healing effects, and is just a general kind of energy source. And you have crystals, quintessence, and like, is there a link between them? It's a little bit kind of weird, but it definitely makes it come across as kind of quite important. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on quintessence? What the first half of the season presents to us?
Yeah, I was a little confused by it at first, but then I remembered I remembered like at the end of the season it was like a huge deal, and I remember like how shocked Karan was. But it's like, what do you mean they're making their own quintessence? What? Like that? Like it was really really important, and I was like, okay, that seems like a problem. But I did. Yeah, so at first I didn't quite understand like what it was or whatever, and you'd cut back to the villains like making this quintessence stuff every once in a while. It's through the power of other planets, right? Like something about like the energy from other planets, unless I'm not getting that right. I don't remember.
Yeah, they show like the druid kind of stealing energy from the planet, and also the like animals on the planet as well, like
Right.
life force.
Right. Okay. So, I do remember that. So that's interesting in itself that this quintessence thing exists in this universe, like in general, as a life force concept. Like how chakra exists in Naruto and stuff like that. Like I guess this is like their version of chakra in this world, like quintessence. And I remember in the first episode, I like rewatching it right after knowing the ending of the season. They mention it's like the quintessence matches with your line. I was like, oh, that thing at the end of the season. So like I don't know what's gonna play into that. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if they're gonna get into like how the quintessence, I can't say that word. The quintessence is with the Voltron, specifically with their lions. If they'll get more into like what it is, I have a feeling they're in season 2. They're going to get into what that is a lot more. So since it was such a big deal at the end of the first season, I'm like, okay, we're probably going to do that, and it's probably going to have something to do with like the lions and their paladins. So yeah, interesting, and obviously a very important plot point at the end there. I don't know much about it myself, but like I said, it seems to be this universe's life force, which that in itself is interesting. Like it's like so far, none of the show's really been realistic, but we haven't seen like any concept of like what drives life and stuff like that quite yet. So yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is Allura is they're kind of really weird about this in regards to like what her power is with regards to like life energy. She controls the castle with her life energy, and then her father passed on to her the ability to basically connect to all of the lions, and that in the first episode she can locate them because of her specific life force. And then obviously she does the thing on the Balmera, and like does that relate to like the Balmera's quintessence, and is it quintessence that is making the crystals or what? Like there's some confusing things about like the energy sources, I suppose. Like they use the crystals for some things, but it seems like just quintessence is another source of energy, and they kind of haven't quite made the full comparison yet as to what exactly like which is which. But definitely some interesting things. But Kelly, why don't you give us the next talking point?
Okay. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go like episode by episode or like just randomly bringing up stuff that I thought about. Because it's like, yeah, we don't want to talk about like whole episodes that would like take forever. But at the same time, I wasn't sure I wanted to categorize this. I guess I'll get in, since I was just thinking about this earlier on, like I just mentioned, like some things I felt like could have been done better. I wanted to talk about the way that they executed the Galra arc. As much as I liked it, I felt like that whole thing could have been like one episode shorter. And we could have filled in I don't know, I'm asking for your guys' opinion on this. I really liked the concept of it, but I felt like they stretched out. Let me get the numbers real quick so I don't screw this up. I feel like
did you mean Balmera arc?
Balmera, not Galra. That's the people guys or whatever their names are. Thank you. Sorry. They all sound the same. They all have like auras in their names. Like you have Balmera, Galra, like I don't know. There's like and everything. Okay. Allura, the Alteans, all that stuff. Okay. So I'm sorry about that. Okay. 7 and 8, Return to Balmera and Rebirth. Those two, right? I felt like that could have been one episode, maybe. Like if they tried. I'm not a storyboard writer person. I don't understand how difficult these things are. But I guess personally, to me, I felt like those two episodes were stretched out a bit to create like one big thing. Plus, we already had an episode with the Balmera with Hunk and Koran on it. I guess I wanted to get your guys' opinion on that pacing of the show because I really think the show did a great job with pacing. This is just the one part where I felt like could have switched them together, could have had another episode of a solo journey with all of them. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Balmera arc is kind of like the big middle of the season kind of major plot point in that they cover it in the fall of the Castle of Lines, the Tears of Balmera, and then the two episodes you mentioned as well, separated by like I think 1 or 2 episodes. So basically 4 episodes of the season cover the Balmera in a certain amount of detail, and it's a really interesting concept because effectively they present the Balmera kind of like the line turtles of the Voltron universe. That they're these giant living things, but they kind of are in this kind of petrified state. That means they're basically just planets for people to live on, and then there's this kind of back and forth relationship in terms of like you can take the crystals as energy sources, but you have to give it back, otherwise you are kind of killing the thing. And it's cool because it kind of presents this idea of like they have to protect the planet, protect the people, and one of the arcs is to get a new energy source for the castle. It definitely, I think, covers a little too much of the season because it gives Hunk like this massive arc where like he's the kind of focus of like so many episodes, and then one of the overall problems with the first 11 13 episodes, whichever way you want to refer to it as, a lot of other characters don't get as much time, like Lance, Keith, apart from a few key moments and stuff like that. But Greg, what were your thoughts on how much time they devoted to the Balmera?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with your statement there. I think it is. I mean, I don't know. It's probably just because it's covered in so many episodes, even if, some episodes it's not like the full focus of the episode, but it definitely does seem like they were focusing on it a good amount. And I don't know, I guess it is kind of important to establish, the power source, or at least, give us the idea of the power source of the lines, or just, how the world works in some sort of fashion, but they didn't really give us too much information, too much, specific, I guess, technicalities on how it actually sort of works. It's just that this is sort of what they use, and this is how they sort of connect with it, what we saw from Koran. So I don't know, I think it is maybe used a bit much. I mean, maybe they could have, squished it a little bit more, or spread it, I don't know how they could have divided a bit differently, but I mean, the whole part with like when they're doing the final sort of battle and stuff, that part was pretty cool. But it was just sort of, I guess, leading up to it, it seemed like they definitely had a lot more focus on it that maybe they could have, put on other parts of it.
And what are your own thoughts, Kelly?
Right. I do really like the concepts of the life force and the planet and everything that they do. The action is pretty cool in like episode 7, and when they fight that big thing, and which I love the design of that big laser monster and the Rebirth or whatever. But as I was like rewatching it again, and as I was looking at it, episode 8 Rebirth is like really stretched out. Like what I mean by that is a lot doesn't actually happen in that episode. Like all they do is fight the big monster, eventually convince them to leave. She gives the energy back, episode over. It's kind of hard to explain. Like if you look through it, a lot of it is just kind of like long pauses of sadness and hope lost by the Balmeran people. And the fight is really cool. Again, the fight with the giant monster is really cool. And I understand that would have been kind of bad to, like, you know, maybe that's why they did it in 2 episodes, because they wanted to really show off this really cool fighting sequence with this giant monster, and they didn't want to like squish that into like the second act, the last act of it. But you notice a lot of the time, like, the episode's just focused on how are we gonna get them out of here? How are we gonna get them out of here? How are we gonna get them out of here for like a really long time? And then, you know, you have the big ending, which also is elongated. I don't know. I don't even know if that's really a problem. It's just something that I felt like, okay, maybe less things could have happened in the first episode to make that tighter, so then we can have, like, I don't know. It's kind of an odd complaint on my part, but it's just something I noticed watching it again, and it made me feel like if they did find a way to squish like into like 1 episode, which I liked the episode before it, by the way, with the 2 rogues or whatever that trick them into like taking the lion. I like that one, even though it mentions the Balmera, like it's on the way, it's like on the journey. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's connecting the 2 plots together. The idea of, like, you know, that you can have your own solo story here, but we do have a goal. We want to get to this place. I like that concept. But like, I don't know. It made me think, like, what other episode could have been in there? You know what I mean? If they found a way to shorten the 2. It seems like such a weird complaint, but it's honestly true. And plus, you know what it is? Maybe it's just like the yellows, but like it wasn't too like the planet is pretty, and I like the idea of the Gara. But I think in Rebirth, particularly when they're like underground half the time, there's just a lot of browns, and you kind of like get tired of looking at all the browns constantly. I don't know. Again, it's a weird complaint on my part, and it's just something I wanted to talk about because it's, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that episode kind of highlights something I noticed rewatching it, in that whenever the team comes up with a plan, they do take a lot of time to just have them all discussing the plan. They say exactly what they're going to do, and then you see them doing it. Whereas I think in a show like Korra, what they tend to do with the plans is they more like say, okay, we're going to make a plan, and then they cut to that plan in action, and you see the plan, what's actually happening by it actually happening, rather than this show, they tend to just have a big discussion, then they activate the plan, and then more discussions, plan, and stuff like that. It just a little thing that just kind of stretches the episodes out a bit, when maybe some of these plans could have been just shown as they're in progress. But the final thing I will mention about the Balmera is that obviously the whole episode Rebirth is about kind of restoring it to a certain state. They're a little bit weird about, like, is this Balmera alive again, or is it just back to its alive but petrified state? Like, I'm kind of thinking that if things get really bad in like the second half of the first season, like episode 24, 25, 26, that we may see like the Balmera as an animal actually like moving and doing stuff as an animal, as opposed to just being a kind of planet that is like stationary. But I suppose, what are your guys' thoughts on that? I suppose, Greg, do you think they will bring the Balmera back now in the kind of second half of the season, or a potential season 2, now that they've devoted so much time to establishing that it's kind of alive again?
I don't know. I think it would really have to be something really sort of dire for them to actually sort of bring it back, because it doesn't really seem like that would be, you know, their actual, like, I guess, need for it. I mean, it would be more need for, you know, the crystals than having it being an actual sort of being. I mean, I don't know. I guess it would have to be some sort of large scale catastrophe that, you know, would sort of, you know, initiate that sort of change, I guess, unless, you know, other Palmera maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It could be interesting just to sort of see it, but I don't know if the show would really go in that sort of direction right now. Maybe.
And what about you, Kelly? Do you think we'll actually see the Balmera as an animal at some stage?
Maybe. I don't quite understand how that would work, because it's inside a planet. So, like, wouldn't it be destroyed if it showed itself? You mean like if you go to the center of the planet? Like if they go to the center of the planet, let's like see it, but then wouldn't that disrupt it? Wouldn't that hurt it or something? Like, well, I don't know.
They're weird about it, isn't that they specifically say the Balmera is an animal, a petrified animal. So like if it's alive again, like.
But I mean, like, isn't it an inhabited planet? Like, okay, I remember the charts, right? The heat charts that Koran was showing, like, on the screens or whatever, and they're like, it's in the center of this planet thing, and it's like alive, and it is the planet technically. You're right. It's like in its own encasing, but like, if the encasing is destroyed, isn't that the planet being destroyed? Unless you're saying there's like an uninhabited version of the Balmera planet, which I wouldn't be surprised, because then that would be a good thing. Not necessarily a good thing because no, it could be a good thing because people could still go there, do the ceremony, and leave. It doesn't necessarily have to be inhabited.
Mm.
So that's a thing. But that's I don't know. I feel like they'll definitely. I think they'll bring up the idea of the Balmera again, of the creature again and its energy. Maybe they'll tie that in with the whole quintessence thing. I don't know idea. But I don't actually know about seeing the creature itself. You know, that kind of reminds me of an episode of Doctor Who. I never brought that up. That like there's actually an episode of Doctor Who that's really similar to this one. Shockingly enough, there's like this ship, and they all think it's just like a ship, but it's actually a giant space whale, and they're like hurting it by it being a ship. And then they're like, it's so stupid, but it kind of reminded me of that. I was like, did you guys get, because it's like very similar. It's like we're hurting the creature by living on the planet and you're not giving back its life force. And it's like, oh, it's like, and then I was watching the Voltron one. I was like, that's oddly familiar. So I don't know if they got an inspiration from that or not, but it's, who knows? I don't think they watch Doctor Who, but whatever. It's just something I thought I'd bring up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my first talking point, I want to talk about the Galra themselves. This is one thing that I think I specifically focused on during my rewatch here. I very much focused very heavily on any scene that was like Galra focused, just like Zarkon on his own, Hagar, those type of characters. And the big thing I noticed was that it kind of, I suppose, potentially hints as to why Zarkon's betrayal happened, in that they established that previously the Galra and the Alteans basically had this kind of truce. They were like in an alliance together because like Allura mentions that she would freely go to the Galra Empire perfectly fine with her father. So some sort of a betrayal happened. And they seem to hint that the big change was the introduction of like magic and the druids and this kind of weird magical technology into them, in that you have that guy Commander Prorock, who in an earlier episode goes against Zarkon's orders because he basically disagrees, thinking that Zarkon is only doing what he's doing because he's being influenced by the witch Hagar. So he clearly dislikes this whole idea that like he feels that the Emperor is basically almost under the control of these kind of witches and druids. And to me it presents this really interesting idea in the enemy faction that he's almost this kind of guy who has kind of become obsessed with this kind of religious magic element, and that's kind of changed away from this more kind of honorable species, which is kind of what we get, this kind of warrior honor species, which a lot of the non-magic wielding kind of Galra people seem to be like. And I just really noticed that here when I think Prorock says to one of the other guys that like the witch Hagar has his ear or something like that, that she is influencing him. But I suppose, Greg, what are your thoughts on the kind of Galra Empire as we see it, and their weird kind of blend of kind of typical army plus magic plus technology and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, it definitely is an odd sort of combo that they have there, and I don't know, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I don't know, overall, I mean, I didn't particularly like hate them or anything, as far as, they're being, like, I guess sort of your typical sort of bad guys who sort of want to rule the world. I mean, it does seem like there is a bit more to it, and especially when you get to the end with all the reveals with Zarkon, it helps to sort of, I guess, flush it out a little bit more, because you can see something, that there was some sort of change, and that he does have, some reason behind his sort of actions. So I like that part of it. But at the same time, it does seem, I don't know, like there's sort of, I guess, sort of like your sort of typical troops. I don't know, almost. But I don't know. There definitely is interesting sides to it. I mean, Hagar does make it a lot interesting. Just the whole sort of, I guess, more mystical sort of, I guess, almost sort of like religion side to it. So there's some, there's some sort of, I don't know, higher purpose maybe, and even with like the other sort of I don't even know if they named him, the other sort of guy who was working with the Quintessence before, when Keith had the splatter over him. Other characters like that seem interesting, other than just the sort of typical sort of general guys that you have around that have sort of their own goals, even though they're still trying to I guess support the whole Galra Empire. So it definitely is interesting to see how they're sort of being developed. I hope for sure that we actually get sort of more on them in the next season, because I think there's definitely sort of a lot more to them that can be sort of explained that would help the show out overall.
Yeah, I think the main thing it highlighted to me was that my first rewatch, I really didn't think too heavily at all about Hagar. But during my second rewatch, I'm kind of like, she is kind of like, to me, the key factor here, almost more so than Zarkon, in that I
Hmm.
feel during Zarkon's backstory, which I assume we will eventually get,
Yeah.
the more important moment is going to be when Hagar is introduced, more so than him potentially on his own betraying anyone. I think she is the one who's going to be kind of manipulating him into some position and stuff like that. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on the Galra and their kind of weird religion, kind of mystic technology bend?
Right. You know, watching it again, like for the first time I definitely spaced out during a lot of the villain stuff. Second time, not as much, but still to the point where like I never got a full grasp on what exactly was going on and what they were doing until like those final episodes. But like, you know, piecing it together in my head, it does seem like, and you're gonna have to say her name for me again because I don't remember it.
Hagar,
Haggard.
Haggor.
Okay, Hagar, right. Okay. She seems like she is a really important factor in that, like, you watch the episodes and like half the time it seems like she's like, even though she works for main bad guy, I'm so bad with names, I'm so sorry. Zarkon?
Yeah, yeah.
Zarkon, cool. I named my Golbat that in Pokemon Go. Yeah, so Hagar like seems like she's working for Zarkon, but at the same time she seems kind of like an advisor to him, like with the magic, and she seems to like with the quintessence when she was making the quintessence. And she seems like a really important key into all of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if like she was like one of the factors of like him turning to like a bad side, because we know now that he was like a black paladin. You know what I mean? That like he was the black at least it's hinted at or something like that in the finale, right? I'm not crazy. And
They
so
basically confirm it.
they basically
Yeah.
confirm they do. They basically confirm
Yeah.
it. And to me, that means that he was once, you know, a paladin and good. So something he had to have changed his mind about something. Maybe she factors into that. I feel like that would make a lot of sense, especially with all the magic that she knows and like you said, that weird religion that they have. Maybe he believed in something in it, and she kind of pulled him in like a Sith Lord. What's that guy's name from Star Wars? Pulling
Palpatine?
in, yeah, Palpatine, right? That kind of thing. I don't know, because it still seems like she works for Zarkon. Like I remember this one episode where like her thing got destroyed and she's like, "No, don't worry, I'll make another one." Like in kind of like a scared kind of way. Like she's like, "Oh man, I didn't mean to disappoint him" kind of way. But at the same time, the way she speaks is also very reassuring of him, like a mentor. Like we'll do this and this and this and this is what we're gonna do. Blah blah blah. So it's I don't know. I want to see more of that in season 2 as well. I don't really know much of what they're doing or what's going on,
Yeah.
other than they're collecting this quintessence or whatever. But I have a feeling like something happened where, at least with Zarkon's origin, something happened where like he, you know, he was a good person or whatever, and but he believes in something that isn't universally seen as good or whatever, and then like he's drawn in by all this promises and stuff. Or maybe something happens where like Alora's father, who could be a paladin, we don't know, could have been a paladin, we don't know, or like any of the other paladins kind of do something to hurt him, like betray him in a way, and he's like, "Oh, now I'm done with this." So I want to see both sides. I want to kind of see the history of like both sides and see like, did the good guys mess up? You know what I mean? Like, why did he turn evil? Maybe the good guys messed up with him or something. So I don't know. I'm saying like that could be a thing. But when it comes to this magic stuff, don't really know. Yeah, but that's my theory anyway, and I'm interested to see how they improve that in season 2.
Yeah. The other thing with Zarkon, of course, is that I think it's pretty heavily implied that he is basically over 10,000 years old. That he wasn't like
Yeah, I
he
was
didn't
gonna ask.
survive this long just because he was in like cryostasis like the others were. That he has been alive, leading this Galra empire that whole time, and the implication is because of this Galra quintessence that has probably done this to him. Because we see other normal looking Galra people, but he looks very different with his eyes. He's got these weird scars, and then he's obviously got that crazy armor that seems to allow him to like harness the magic and stuff like that. So it definitely seems like some part of this story is like him being drawn in with this whole idea of like potentially immortality, and that this Galra quintessence is the only way to do that. So that's another factor in this, and that he's he's like one of the oldest living beings, and the reason that's considered old and not just like, oh, the Galra lived that long is because actually the Voltron comic establishes that there's this species called the Mu, which live at somewhere between 10 and 100,000 years, and that's considered like super old. So I think that's like a rarity in the galaxy. So that's a nice little detail that the comic kind of gave us, so that Zarkon being 10,000 years old is actually like a kind of crazy thing, even though no one brings it up. Um, But I think we're back around to you, Greg. So what is your next talking point?
Yeah, I guess I'll just sort of piggyback off of the Galra, but just the idea of there being an inside man in the Galra Empire that's actually sort of working to actually help the Paladins.
Yes, this mysterious character that comes in at the end, turns off the barrier that's stopping them from making the wormhole on the way out. And yeah, he's very clearly this is a kind of normal Galra person. Breaks in, turns it off on purpose to let them go. So um, it's really difficult to know what exactly is going on here. My idea is that this is potentially a Galra rebel. Galra people who disagree with the Empire and what it's doing, and more agree with, I suppose, the way the Galra used to be, and that they still support the alliance with Altea and disagree with what happened. Like, I assume there would have to be people who would disagree with that. So I see that as potentially being a thing. And maybe this guy is also one of the previous paladins, but again, the whole 10,000 years thing probably stops that from being a thing unless he was also in cryo or kept alive by some other way. But I thought it was just a really cool thing to have in the last episode, not just the whole Black Paladin reveal, but also random rogue Galra character, like out of nowhere. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on this character?
Yeah, to be frank, I kind of forgot about it until you guys brought it up again. And I was like, oh yeah, that craziness. I completely forgot that had happened. Theory-wise, I remember like in the moment of it happening, I was like, I have to figure out who the heck this guy is. And yeah, there's a lot of theories. It could be Rebel. I have a feeling he has some kind of connection with the Paladins. I could be wrong though. Yeah, like with the Paladins. I don't know. His sword kind of looked interesting to me. The sword he stabbed into the back. Have we seen that before? Is that a regular Galru weapon? I feel like it probably is, and I'm not, and I'm thinking too far into it. But it looked kind of cool. It looked kind of different. So that in itself is kind of a sign. I don't know. I could be wrong. Should I start getting into this? I don't know if I should start getting into this because this is something I was thinking about when I was talking about. I don't know. How do you guys feel about theories? How do you guys feel about like theories that could like spoil huge points in like season 2 or like
is this the Keith theory?
Yes.
I think it's fine to say because it really is a theory.
Yeah, okay. I don't know because everyone was like talking about. I feel like it's not even just a theory though. I feel like it's basically confirmed because of something else that I could tell you guys. If you'd want to know, I don't know. It's not spoilers. Like I saw the script of episode 1 of season 2 or anything like that. Based on something else. Like if you guys want me to tell you, it's not that huge. Is that all right with you guys?
I think there's enough setup just in this show that's worth at least mentioning.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So the theory is that Keith is actually Galra. This comes from a lot of different evidence. One of it is that like he, first of all, he's orphaned. He lives on his own. We don't know how he ended up like the way like he is like on Earth and everything like that. We don't know a lot about his past, but we know that he doesn't have parents and he's an orphan. That he was raised probably on Earth for the most part. So maybe that's how he like adapted into like an Earth environment. Who knows? There's a lot of other theories in this. I don't know if it was in this episode or the episode before it. He burned his hand. And when he looked at it, it was purple, and then it went back to regular skin. It was like he was like, what the heck, and then it like went back to regular skin, and then he went back. You're like, oh, okay, that seemed important. It didn't. At first I thought it was him healing himself, which maybe it was, but like, why was there purple there? And it didn't look like it didn't look quite like a burn. Like it was weird. So a lot of people think that's a sign of it. But the biggest thing I noticed, the biggest thing that made me think he's Galra is just the fact that he was able to use Galran technology. There's like 1 or 2 episodes where he puts his hand on a thing and it opens. Like, so I forgot what happened. And then Lance is like, how'd you do that? He's like, I don't know, I just put my hand on it. And then literally like a scene before that, we had a scene where Shiro put his hand on it, and it was because it was Galra. So you're like, okay, I have a feeling he's Galra, which that in itself is going to be really, really, really interesting for Keith in season 2, and I really hope they do that. Maybe he's Keith's dad, or maybe he's a relative of Keith. That's something I was thinking about. Like maybe he knows Keith or something like that. Or not necessarily. It's probably like if it's going to be a relation, it's probably his dad, or maybe it's like his guardian or uncle or somebody. You know what I mean? That would be kind of interesting because he probably saw Keith fighting Zarkon on that ship, like singled him out specifically based on all the chaos because Keith kind of made himself known, you know what I mean, by like fighting Zarkon head on. So maybe he realized as a rebel, maybe he's not a rebel, maybe he is, I don't know. Why else would he like bring his son to Earth. Who knows? There's a lot of theories, I guess you could say. But I guess to me that would be kind of cool if he's like related to Keith or something, if that theory is true. Which I think I'm just gonna straight up say. Should I just straight up say it? Okay. Potential huge spoilers if you don't want a confirmation that this theory is true. Anyone who's listening, Keith is Galra in the original show. In the original show, it's like they reveal the fact that he is Galra. So it's like I'm not seeing any evidence to see why they would change that. You know what I mean? Like that, like in the original Voltron show, that happens. Like we find out that he's gone. Like if this was an original idea, I would definitely be like, oh, it's a theory, we don't quite know, but it'd be kind of cool. But the fact that this is like totally a thing in the original show, you're like, oh well, of course it's true now, especially with all the hints and stuff like that, right? So at least that's what I think. But who knows? They could switch it up a bit. Maybe he's half Galra.
Yeah,
that's probably the case. Actually, he's probably half Galra, but we'll see.
Yeah, like I think that's one of the things in that, like, well, as we'll probably get into later on, about people thinking they're going to potentially switch up which characters in which lines, and people are switching colors and stuff like that, just because of the way the original show is. They're probably going to have a slightly different approach to a similar story, so it may not just be the idea, yep, he's full on Galra, but you know, whether that be like he's half Galra or he was captured when he was super young and like basically made to have the essence of Galra or something like that. It is a really good theory. The other one being that Zarkon specifically says he fights like a Galra as well, and he seems to have this kind of just beyond a personality trait of like becoming like obsessed with the battle, which seems to kind of be a Galra trait as well. So that's at least something to mention. And yeah, they super emphasize the whole hand on the controller thing, because they have the Shiro bit, they have the Keith bit, and then immediately afterwards Hunk also opens a door by getting the robot hand and doing the same thing. So they like crazy emphasize that whole bit. But I suppose, Greg, what are your thoughts on the Keith is Galra theory?
I think it might have, I mean, I don't know, from everything and based on like the previous show, it definitely seems like it's something that can be, really true. I mean, I don't know. I mean, at some parts, I don't know. I was like, maybe he's not. So I don't know. It definitely seems like something that could be happen, but I don't know. I would definitely I don't know. I would hope that they would take it in a different way than, exactly like the other show.
Yeah, but I suppose getting back to the like original core at this point, I think this new Galra character definitely adds an interesting element to the show in regards to like, where is he gonna like appear again? Like, is he just kind of undercover in the normal Galra kind of empire, or what? I think with regards to the point about what his sword is, it could be something like most of the Galra right now are like kind of enhanced with technology, whether it be armor, blasters, and stuff like that. That sword could be like a traditional Galran blade or something like that. That's what the normal weaponry they used prior to being enhanced with technology or something like that, because they seem like a very kind of like proud warrior species. So having like a kind of fancy sword like that would sort of make sense. But yeah, I think the rebel theory right now is kind of what I'm going for, and somewhat of a connection to Keith seems to make sense in that he does that like at the key moment when like kind of Keith is out of action and like he's just been saved by Shiro and stuff like that. So it definitely could be a kind of key aspect, but definitely one we'll have to wait and see. I don't even think we have a name, obviously. It's probably a pretty important thing they don't want to talk about just yet. He doesn't speak, so we wouldn't have a voice actor either. But Kelly, I think we're on to you for the next talking point.
Right, okay. Kind of an odd one to bring up. Not sure. It's more theory stuff, so I don't know if they'll I don't know. We should probably start like talk about like what is happening on the show. But I guess I wanted to bring this up because I don't know. Are we allowed to incorporate the comic into this? I'm not talking just specifically about the comic, but like a theory that also has stuff in the comic.
Yeah, sure. I don't think there's really too much to spoil about the comic, really.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I wanted to talk about like all of the things we don't know and stuff like maybe like how Al4 could have also been a paladin. We were kind of talking about Zarkon theories earlier, but I guess I want to continue on that with maybe like more like thoughts on like how like Al4 himself could have been a paladin or something like that, because there's a scene in the comic, a thing in the comic where like they have like a thing where the paladins go like sit and then Al4's name is on the table. So it's like, okay, does that mean he's a paladin? Like it's interesting, and I think only one that can read the Altean language is obviously the two Alteans of the group. So Koran could have easily read all the other ones, but he chose Alfor's. Maybe like, Zarkon was like another name that he didn't want to read. Things like that, right? And then Karan himself knowing where it is. Karan like knowing how it all works and everything like that. Like I don't know if he's a paladin. He probably wasn't, but like he seems to know a lot about it. So it makes you think like, what was his role? You know what I mean? In that regard. So I guess that in general.
Yeah. So I'll actually read out that little section of the comic. I have it here. So they walk into this. Basically, it's a bar. They call it like a nunvillery or something like that. It's basically to get that drink, nunville. They go into a nunvillery, and they have this table. Other people are sitting in it, and Karan basically gets these aliens to move out by saying, "This is our seat. See what it says here, Alfor." And he points to this carving on the table. It says Alfor. Then he says this line. Names in red, green, blue, yellow, and black. 5 assigned seats, and none of them is for you. They don't show the other markings on the table. The only marking they show is the one that says Alfor, and it appears to be in black. And like, there's this weird thing about like, but if Zarkon was the Black Paladin, why is Alfor's name there in black? Because they specifically mentioned in this comic that, oh, the Paladins went on hundreds of missions together. So it's this weird thing about like, was there a switch at some point, or was it just this thing where like, Alfor is there to reserve the table for the Paladins, and it's like a 6th marking on the table, but it's not actually one of the names of the Paladins. It's a really weird thing. What I will say is doing a little bit of kind of investigation stuff for the show. It is stated in a fact file, I think it's from the Voltron website, that it was actually Alfor who created Voltron. That's a little fact on. I think it's one of Allura's kind of fact card. It says specifically Alfor was the one who created Voltron, which isn't stated in the show, but kind of tells us something pretty important, I think. So it doesn't like confirm who is and who isn't the Paladins, but it's a really interesting idea. But straight away, the only thing we know about the previous Paladins is that Zarkon was the previous Black Paladin, commander of the Black Lion. But I think the interesting thing to that is that during the flashback in the first episode, when they're talking to him over the like intercom, and he's clearly like opposing them and about to destroy Altea, they like Allura mentions, we need to form Voltron, and if he's the Black Lion and he's opposing them, how can they actually form Voltron without another Black Paladin? So there must be at least someone else out there who was capable of piloting the Black Lion, but maybe had never officially done it, whether that be Allura or Alfor themselves. I'm not really sure. But I suppose, Greg, what are your thoughts on that? I suppose the history of the Paladins, the previous batch of Paladins. Do you have any thoughts, theories about them?
I don't know. There's a lot that could be within. That's interesting what you say about the comic and about Alfor. I mean, from watching the show, you always sort of, or at least from this little bit that I've seen, I thought that definitely could be a possibility that Alfor could have been a paladin, and if he is indeed the one who actually created Voltron, then that kind of lends itself to that sort of theory. So that wouldn't seem sort of too odd to me. I mean, it would be interesting just in general, just because of what that would mean for the group if Alfor was one of the paladins and Zarkon was one too. Maybe that could have been something that was caused a rift and caused Zarkon to go out on his own. So it definitely can make for an interesting storyline if that is true and that is how it turns out.
Yeah, like I suppose the only theory I would have is that Alfor was perhaps like the original Black Paladin, but when he focused his attention more on actually ruling Altea, so he got Zarkon in to be the new Black Paladin, kind of stepping down. That might explain why Alfor potentially has a history as the Black Paladin, but before Shiro, Zarkon was the most recent Black Paladin, and it may explain that potentially Allura has the potential to be the Black Paladin as well, and stuff like that. But it's interesting what they do with it. But Kelly, do you have any thoughts yourself on the previous Paladins?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, one of the theories that I kind of have is, I think that Alfor, first of all, I had no idea he created Voltron. That's a thing. That thank you for letting me know that. That kind of makes it more interesting. To me, that makes me feel as though what could be the case is that Alfor was the original Black Paladin. And it would prove, that would be even more proven, like the fact that he made it. The Black Lion seems to be like the leader. He's a king. His name is written in black on the thing. That's making me think he's the Black Lion, right? Okay. But here's the thing. Zarkon also said he's the Black Lion. What if like Alfor was like teaching Zarkon, or like Zarkon was like his apprentice, or like, you know, his next to be the Black Paladin, like he was like promised to be the next Paladin. Maybe he never actually was the Black Paladin, and like he's saying he wants to be the Black Paladin. Okay, you guys ever see Kung Fu Panda? I know that's a really random sidetrack, but have you seen Kung Fu Panda?
Yeah, and I know what you're going for.
Yeah, you know where I'm going for. It's kind of similar to that, except he like actually is capable of being the Black Lion, but he's too like he started believing in things that was too like evil and stuff, and then they like rejected him. They rejected him as part of the group, even though he was training for so long. And then he left, and he's evil and is destroying everything. I don't know. That's a theory, that he was going to be the Black Lion, or maybe was briefly, and then he screwed up or something, and they all hated him. There's a lot of things with that, but now I'm pretty solid that Alfor was the Black Lion at some point, and that Zarkon either was meant to be the Black Lion, and then something happened, or he was the Black Lion for a little bit, and then something happened. But anyway, that makes it a lot more interesting now that you brought up the fact that he created Voltron. Alpha created Voltron, and I really think he is the Black Lion now, if that's the case. Yeah, that made it more interesting to me. It's more theories, yay! I know that was a very specific theory, but that could be a thing, and especially considering the way that they spoke to each other. Like, even look back at the first episode, and like the way Zarkon and Alfor kind of spoke to each other, or Laura too. Like they kind of said it in a way as if they knew him. I know it's kind of weird to say, but they were like, Zarkon, don't do that. Like it wasn't as simple as bad guy we barely know. It was like, okay, seems like you guys know who Zarkon is, so. There's a lot to be discovered. And you know what? There's one thing that's kind of bothering me about this. You ever wonder why, like, none of them just ask? Like, why they don't go, like, or Pidge or Hunk, people who like to learn, hey, so, who are the paladins before us? Are there history books here? I'd like to learn more about what we're doing. Like, I feel like the smart ones would want to read about it more, you know? And we don't do that because it would spoil the plot. So that's a little weird in itself.
Yeah. I do think that we may learn about the previous paladins, because I suppose getting more plot focused here, the way we end the season is basically super suddenly, and obviously like everyone has a reaction to that, how suddenly it's just like the wormhole is compromised by Hager's magic blast, and basically we see everyone slip out of the wormhole and basically go somewhere they have no idea where they're going. Quran specifically mentions that they have no control over where they're going, and they all exit the wormhole at like a different point, not really together. Maybe they're setting up like groups of people where like 2 of them are here, 2 of them are there. But I'm thinking they're setting up some sort of a like little training arc at the beginning of the second half of the season, where we're going to have most of them fairly solo, and they're on some sort of a planet, and they learn something about, you know, their connection as a paladin to their lion, and become more powerful because of that, and so they're better when they come back. I think that's what they're setting up going forward, and potentially that is like some really big bonding moment with their lion, where they may reveal some kind of Avatar-esque that like every past paladin is like somehow their essence is like within the lion or something like that, and they can have like an Avatar state kind of communication thing with the previous paladins or something like that to teach them, because Zarkon as like an expert paladin reveals that like the Black Bayard could be transformed into like 3 or 4 different weapons, whereas like we only see our paladins use one, maybe a secondary attachment or something like that. So they still have a lot to learn, of course. So that's what I'm thinking that they're building towards, some sort of a training arc before everyone comes back together. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on where we're heading immediately after the end point of the first half of the season?
Well, you did bring up the training arc, which has me slightly concerned, because it makes me think TMNT season 3 will always be scarred by how long that took. But with the look of season 4, anyway. What do you call it? I don't know. I would think a little bit of that. Like learning more about their Bayards and more their connection with their lions. I feel like they're gonna learn more about like their lion connections, not necessarily like training to get like physically tough or anything like that. Maybe a little bit depending on where they are and what they have to do. But I think it would focus more on like connecting with their lion, or like or learning something, or learning a new skill from their Bayard. Maybe, but I don't think that'll be like a main focus. It would be interesting to see. That's something I'm a little bit worried about in season 2. Not worried about, but I want to see how this is handled, because I kind of don't want maybe for like one episode, but like I kind of don't want all of them to be like completely separated, like completely,
Yeah.
like you know, like, and that seems to be the case. I was watching it again, I was watching the finale again, and like I think each of them has their own place that they fall out of. It's not like there's a portal specifically made for them, but when you have the chaos of what they're doing, they all go in different directions. So I don't think any of them are going to be on the same planet with each other, which I don't know if that's a problem or not, because it's
Yeah.
like, if you're, are they all going to be by themselves? Are we going to have to constantly keep cutting between like each of them doing something differently? That's going to take a lot of time. Plus, you have Allura and Karan being like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" Like, I don't know if they teleport too? Is that like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
they
they fell out of it too, right?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
In the bigger ship. Yeah, okay. So we know Laura and Karan will be together because they didn't like evacuate in separate ships or anything like that. They're stuck in the castle ship, but all the other paladins are separated. So it's like, how are they going to handle that? I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping it's not. I hope they're not too separated for too long. Like, and I know that maybe, I don't know if that's just me, but like I think that would be like take up way too much time if they are. But at the same time, if they're not separated for that long, what was the point of separating them to begin with? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think they need to find the right balance with that.
Yeah, I think they have a couple of arcs set up though. Like, cause if Shiro is left on his own, given what happened in the last episode, like that could be like a really interesting episode if you focus just on him having had like the Black Line taken over. He gets control of it again, but he knows that like, as far as he's aware right now, Zarkon is like a better Black Paladin than him, has some sort of a control over the Black Line that he doesn't. Keith also, I suppose, would potentially have a lot to kind of think about after his battle with Zarkon. The others, I suppose, not as much. In that like they're there as the paladins, of course, and were affected by what happens, but don't like really have like a individual arc going on. And then, of course, like Illura and Karan in the Castle of Lions, like where they end up could be interesting. Like I think it'd be funny if they were the ones who ended up like next to Earth or something like that. So like they're forced to basically land on the only planet next near them, and it is Earth, and just that you see them interacting with Earth, and because I think that's something that eventually has to come back, like that they do return to Earth and kind of reveal to the Galaxy Garrison that yes, there are aliens out there. Stop being so weird about aliens and all that sort of stuff. But Greg, what are your thoughts on where they left off the season? What do you think they're doing? Is everyone going to be separated or what?
No, I mean, I don't know. It would seem hard for me not to believe that they're going to be separated in some form or fashion. I mean, I don't know. I guess it would be neat if a couple were and sort of grouped up, but it definitely seems to me like this would be, the time where they would all be split up. And I mean, I guess if each one got like their own episode, for them, and then Karan and Altera. So I don't know. I mean, I could definitely see them doing something where they're, sort of training or sort of getting more experience as far as their lines and their barriers. I mean, that would seem sort of the typical progression to do, but I would hope that, they would group it together a lot quicker because I think it could be a lot better if, it's always better and more interesting when they're actually as a group and when they can actually form Voltron. So I would like to see them come back as quickly as sort of possible. But I definitely see them doing some sort of solo mission or just some solo, I don't know, maybe some soul finding through these next couple episodes until they all get back together.
The other thing is from the comic as well, is the original plan before the plot happens in the comic, before Karan is kidnapped. That's kind of the plot of the comic. He basically is bringing them on this training mission. They're going to this system, the Carthulian system, and he's basically saying, okay, each one of you lines, you're going to go to a separate planet in this system, and that planet is kind of suited to train you and your lion. There's a volcanic world for the red line, an ice
Hmm.
world for the blue line, kind of sandy desert environment for the yellow, forest for the green, and a kind of cavernous area for the black line. And it kind of is going to emphasize and further the skills of each of those things. And as far as we are aware, they kind of miss out on this because they immediately go to, save Quran. And unless the comic returns to these places, they've kind of just set up these previous Paladin training grounds for kind of almost no reason. So I think those planets would be a kind of cool place to do. But again, if they're in the same system, they'd be relatively easy for them all to like meet up again, unless they do something where like the communications were ruined by the wormhole or something like that, and that's kind of part of the plot. But that could be interesting. The comic could actually turn out to be like more important than we think. But I think we are back around to you, Greg, for a talking point.
Okay, cool. Let's see, what point do I want to bring up? Okay, I guess this isn't necessarily spoilers, just sort of a thought idea, but just basically, and this is, I guess, this is sort of motivated by one of the quotes where we have a flashback of Pidge with her father, her brother, and mother all eating together, and he says, "You're going to be part of something big. The whole universe will sit up and sort of take notice." I was just thinking about how it will be, and I don't know if this will even happen in the next half of the next season, but how, Earth will actually sort of respond to Voltron and just the whole idea of there being aliens and that sort of idea of being out in the open.
Yeah, like it's a big thing, obviously, if they will include Earth, because obviously one of our issues that we had when we discussed it on the Movers podcast, or general thoughts, was that they really rushed to get away from Earth, and then only refer to it in that, like, okay, we're all missing Earth, but we can't go back. We're devoted to being paladins. And then, especially what the whole situation where they kind of keep Shiro hostage and think he's crazy, even though they're searching specifically. The Kerberos mission is to search for alien life. They they just ignore the fact that he's telling them he was abducted by aliens and has like an alien arm. So I think something like one of the lions or the Castle of Lions landing on Earth could be a cool way to introduce that and see how that works, because they obviously established that Earth is not under the control of Zarkon, and the Galra have recently found Earth because obviously a little kind of scuffle takes place close to there. So Earth could be in danger. That could be a way to bring them in and begin to have like Earth like as an alliance with Altea or whatever, because obviously most of the paladins are, all of the paladins are Earth. So it should be a thing that they do, and that could be a interesting arc. And obviously like if they ever, I suppose, reintroduce Pidge's brother and father and where they were, of course, and they're on some sort of like labor colony or something like that. There could be some really cool stuff with relation to like humanity finally, the planet finding out about this stuff. But Kelly, do you have any thoughts about how they're going to approach dealing with Earth in the future?
I don't know, but I hope that they do. I think you guys are right about that, that it really needs to be focused on again because it's their home. You know what I mean? And and like you said, like they just kind of rush to get out of there, like not actually like wanting to leave, but like the show itself was like, this is a thing, Garrison Project. They're pilots in a space thing. They don't know about aliens yet. And then they go off and fight aliens like in the same episode. It's really weird, and I think it'd be a huge mistake to not bring it up again, because we do have, first of all, like, Lance obviously misses it almost more than anyone else, which I thought was interesting. You brought up the fact that Allure and Corinne, maybe they can land on Earth and like they can like form an alliance or something, or maybe one of them can land on Earth and see that it's in trouble, that like they're fighting off the Galra, which is like really, really bad. But maybe all of Galra's forces are like focusing on Voltron right now, but you have some of them starting to try to get to Earth, and they're like, okay, we have to stop this because we're all from Earth and this would be really bad. So that's a thing, because they were so worried about the Balmera, obviously for a good reason, but it's like, what if their own home was being attacked, which now they know. Like, I don't know, I feel like the Galra would know where Earth is now and start to take it over soon, so that's a thing. With these shows, you always got to ignore the fact that time works differently in different locations. That's like the one thing I know is because like one thing I thought about is like they all get back to Earth and it's like 300 years later or something, or like no time has passed. I don't know the difference. Is it that time slows down or it goes faster far away? I don't know. Okay, I think it's that time slows down the farther away you are. I don't know. It's really weird. Anyway. Yeah, so I really hope they go back to Earth. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I think that they need to. You got to think about like you said, Matt, and Pidge's brother and father. They have a home on Earth, and her mother is there. It's like all these. I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do it, but if they like never address Earth again, that'd be really bad. I hope that they go back to it in some way or form. I don't know. It's.
Yeah, I suppose the only notable other thing about Earth is obviously that one of the places that Alfor sent the lines to was the Blue Line was sent to Earth, of course. So the Alteans clearly knew about it and chose it for some reason. I don't know if it's because, according to the Alteans, Earth is like completely out of the way and no one will ever know about it. Zarkon clearly didn't. Just conveniently, Earth was one of the only places in the entire universe that he hasn't taken over, but that's the thing with these type of shows. That could be pretty telling that they placed it there of all the places. It's something I think they will have to approach at some point. Will it be addressed immediately? I'm not sure, but I can see someone getting sent close to Earth, on Earth, through the wormhole. Like I could see the Castle of Lions, maybe Lance. Not really sure who else could be a good choice, but we'll definitely have to see. But Kelly, what's your next talking point?
Hmm. Okay. Kind of. I don't know if this is kind of a weird one. I guess. I don't know how to word it. I guess I wanted to talk about the like show structure in general, and like, and I get we keep talking about season two. This is gonna kind of come up again with season two, so sorry about that. But I guess I wanted to talk about like how they can do, or if they're still going to do episodes that aren't necessarily super connected to the big plot of the show. Like a lot of season one had like overall um, a feeling of there's like an arc going on here, like when the castle got taken over and the Balmera. Those were like arcs, right? The
Mm.
only three episodes I was able to pick out that weren't like connected hugely anyway, like with an arc, were episodes 2, 3, and 9, which is Assembly Required, Return of the Gladiator. Sorry, that was a phone notification. Return of the Gladiator and Crystal Venom. And I really like those episodes a lot. And I feel like it'd be cool for a show. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I actually like one-off episodes that are connected, obviously, to the whole show, but are like contained in one episode. I guess I was wondering, like what is like how do you guys feel about these episodes, Assembly Required, Return of the Gladiator, and which, Return of the Gladiator is kind of connected to the castle being taken over, because then they celebrate about it in the next episode. So again, all of these do connect loosely. I guess I mean episodes that don't connect super tightly to each other, like an arc, like Crystal Venom. And like how you think they're going to handle that in season two, like, or if they should, or if they should stick to longer arcs of the story, or should have like one-off episodes, because this show has a feeling of like Power Ranger stuff, right? Like, and I kind of like that sometimes they have like, we got to save this planet, let's fight a monster, and then go to the next one. I don't want them to all be similar. They haven't been so far. Crystal Venom and Return of the Gladiator are two very different concepts, but I kind of want to see that traditionalist come in a little bit more. I like the arcs, but I kind of want to see like one-off fighting episodes. But what are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, you could disagree if you want.
Mm.
Eh.
For in what we've seen so far, like the only episode I really noted was like kind of like very kind of one-offy, like that I didn't quite like. This is weirdly placed. It's fun, but it's weirdly placed. Was taking flight, which is obviously when the blue line is captured by those
Oh yeah,
two
that
kind
was.
of people. That's the most kind of like one-off episode. The only real like really important moments in that are like the two scenes with the Galra, where it's basically like really heavily early on alluding to the fact that Zarkon is connected to Voltron somehow. He says something like, "I know better than anyone the power of Voltron," and that's a big scene. I think that's also where they set up the whole idea of like Hager has the ear of Zarkon, and that whole kind of subplot with Prorox, the commander, that seems to always come off on the bad end of those situations. Going into season two, I wouldn't mind, like one or two of them. I think if they're going to start off with like training episodes that we've talked about already, they kind of have that kind of built in already, in that we're going to see potentially like 4 or 5 or 6 like individual kind of things on like separate planets before everyone kind of teams up or something like that. And that could be fun. And then you have more plot focused stuff when they all come back together. Um, it seems like everything is relatively serious, but they've kind of temporarily disengaged from Zarkon, and that they're all escaped. So, I can see them having some time for some less crazy plot focused episodes, but just once they get the balance right of like having those episodes feel somewhat important and not just uh like more like the episodes Kelly talked about rather than the taking flight, I suppose, is kind of what I'm talking about. In general, I didn't mind really any of the episodes and this season and how they approached it. But Greg, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they should do more one-off episodes? How plot focused should they be?
I mean, I think the way that they did it this season was actually pretty good. I mean, most of the episodes, even if they weren't like super heavy on the plot, still felt like they were part of the whole overarching sort of theme. So it didn't seem like there wasn't any episode that really felt to me like it was completely like out of the norm. Like it was like, it wasn't like a complete filler episode or anything like that. So for me, as long as it has something to connect with like the main story through line, then I think it can work pretty well, even if, like if they're going on like their training exercise, as long as they reference that, there are other paladins that they are doing, their own either mission, or that somehow that we're leading towards, them all coming together somehow. I think that can work out pretty well as far as, being episodes that aren't necessarily, super sort of serious in that regard. So I think, the way that they're sort of, showing us so far, I think has worked out, at least for me.
Mm. And Kelly, do you have any further thoughts?
Not really. It's just something I wanted to bring up. I really kind of tend to like one-off episodes sometimes. Like I feel like not one-off episodes, but I guess I appreciate them in the midst of all the epic arcs that have to continue through a bunch of them. Like I think back to like Avatar: Last Airbender, and things like the Northern Air Temple or the Fortune Teller, which I know are just are two season one examples I wanted to bring up because it's season one. Those two have like nothing to do with anything else, and but still tie into the lore of the show. And I love those episodes. You know what I mean? I think those are like underrated episodes of the show. So I guess it's just something I kind of hold on to because it's like I feel like a show wouldn't be good if all of it was just one long arc of story without any like breather in betweens. But then you'd also have like Power Rangers or something if every episode was a single one-off episode, or like you'd have something like SpongeBob, like everything's different, there's no canon in between. So I like the melding of the two, and I guess that's why I wanted to bring it up, and I'd be interested to see what they do in season 2. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly, I think what most of us don't want to happen is for this to kind of too heavily go back to its roots as a kind of Power Rangers-esque show and just have a villain appear every episode, fight on the ground, fighting the lions when it gets bigger or something like that, and just fights for the sake of fights. They managed that quite well in season 1, really only having kind of like 2 fights against like giant opponents in Voltron, and that kind of working out fairly well. It, obviously referencing kind of what the show kind of has to be, big battle of like giant robots, but also then having this like interesting approach of like Voltron versus the entire Zarkon fleet, or at least the kind of core main group, and Zarkon's able to rip Voltron apart. That's a really like interesting approach, that he doesn't have a line, but he seems powerful enough, just enhanced by magic and quintessence, and having the Black Bayard, that he can fight Voltron even though he's normal kind of sized. So I thought the kind of balance of like fighting was actually kind of well done. And if they do a training arc, they don't really mind if they all have to kind of encounter a villain themselves and like defeat it, some sort of an enemy. Just I hope we don't suddenly run into like 5 episodes in a row where it's just new monster with a new power, new monster with a new power. That's kind of what I don't want. I like that it is in general relatively plot focused. Everything roughly links into the next thing. So that's good. But my next talking point is going to be, I suppose it's kind of about theories going forward, but a lot of discussion heading into the next batch of episodes, whenever they come out, is about if the current Team Voltron will change at all. Will new people come in to pilot different lines? Will colors change? And people are speculating this because, of course, they're kind of almost presenting Shiro, and he might, not be the right one to be the Black Paladin or something like that. They seem to be presenting something there, and a lot of people are speculating that Allura might become the new Black Paladin, and that they kind of hint that that might be a thing. Some people are suspecting Keith to become the leader because of the way the original show was, and I think Allura was originally in like the blue line or something like that, and we could see a bunch of switches coming down the road. But I suppose it's worth talking about because there's definitely the potential for that. But Greg, do you think they'll do any kind of changing like that? Someone will come in, change the pilots around?
I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily would see any sort of new characters come in. I mean, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say, but there's not many other established characters as of now that could just sort of jump in. I mean, Allura, yeah, that could be a possibility. I mean, maybe Karan, maybe just because he's sort of in the vicinity he could be, and he seems to know a lot already. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, unless, with all the other extra theories and, people possibly changing sides or being part of the other empire, then, yeah, then I could definitely see, some switch ups happening. But I mean, as of right now, I mean, other than Shiro and, not necessarily, possibly being sort of the best choice for it, just because, there is another current Black Paladin out there that, has, from what we've seen, has more control over it than him. I don't really see too much any other sort of switch ups necessarily. I mean, I think they definitely could do it, and it would be interesting to see that, just because I think it would be cool to see how a different sort of combination of people would work. Maybe it might be actually better. So I don't know. I think No, it definitely could be something that would be interesting to see, but I'm not really sure how I feel about it quite yet.
What about you, Kelly? Do you think they'll switch up any of the paladins?
Um, Honestly, I don't think so. At least not in the season 1B. Maybe they'll hint at something at the end of season 1B, but I don't think they'll do that, like for the sake of the show. But yeah, you're right about like, there being hints that like Shiro might not quite be the one to like, pilot it, or like, something could happen with some of the other characters. I don't quite feel like that's the case though with Shiro. Like it's weird how they've been handling who can or can't fly the lions, because Shiro would have never been chosen if he couldn't like fly it at all. I mean, maybe the idea is that he can't bring it to its best potential, or that he needs to work on being more, he needs to have a stronger connection with his lion before he can really be a true black paladin, that he could actually be the source of some of the problems. That would be kind of interesting. But I don't want to think, I don't like to think about it in a way where like he's the wrong paladin for it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, because he would have never been even accepted then. You know what I mean? Like, then it wouldn't have happened at all. He has the potential, but maybe he hasn't lived up to it yet based on everything he's been through. So, that to me, that's kind of, would be interesting. And then maybe he takes a break from it or something, and then like someone else does it or something, like Alora. I don't know. But I don't think there'll be a switch up. Not really yet. I don't even know if I really want one. It would be interesting, but I still feel like I want to see these guys more like solidly like being the pilots, and more having a connection with their lions before we get some kind of crazy switch up. Like I said, maybe they'll do something near the end of season 1B or whatever you want to call it, season 2. But I kind of don't want to see that next season. That's my opinion. But
Yeah, like for me, the only thing I can potentially see happening is that Shiro, very affected by what happened in the last episode here, would like potentially like leave on this kind of journey himself to kind of figure out kind of who he is, what's going on, and it would cause potentially Allura to take over the Black Line temporarily, so they can still form Voltron and all that stuff, but Keith is not Keith. Shiro is, just out of action for a while, and he has a kind of character development arc and comes back stronger and takes it over again. Something like that is I can see happening. But I suppose it is worth discussing what they do with Shiro and the Black Line, because at the same time as he's the only one established to kind of have potential problems with his line, they also set him up as like being the one who arguably has the best connection to his line of the group as well, because during the nosedive test, he's the one who has the big seeing through the eyes of his line moment, and the others don't really have that. They all have like moments of bonding with their line, but I don't think there's been anything quite as strong as that. Maybe Keith and the Red Line, and like in the middle of battle, him getting that new cannon on the back is kind of highlighting their strength. But like none of the others have really had that. Like Hunk hasn't really, like apart from the Voltron power up, hasn't had like a power up for just his line, but the others have had like power ups. And then the other thing is that Voltron falls apart because Zarkon, enhanced with magic, wearing that kind of armor and the cloak, has an impact on the lion, and he can kind of speak to Shiro. But after he takes that off, that's not the case anymore. So it's not that just like Zarkon on his own can just control the lion. He has to be kind of enhanced with Galra magic, Galra quintessence to do that, and kind of channel himself into Voltron, into the Black Line. So there are limitations to like the control that Zarkon has over that. It's not just that like it just automatically kind of bows to his will over Shiro's. And then I think the other thing, going into Shiro's backstory more, we still don't know the full extent of the backstory, in that they addressed like how he's given the new arm, but they never tell us like how he lost the arm. Like, of course he got injured in battle, but like, did he just in battle lose an arm? Or is it just like a lot of the other Galra soldiers that he was just modified? Like Hagar specifically notes that she wanted to enhance him and basically make him part of the Galra army because she saw something in him, but it didn't work. So to me, it more says that he never lost his arm. It was just replaced by Hagar, kind of more so than anything. And that may just that the corruption potentially of that arm may be why he doesn't have the 100% connection to his lion. And maybe part of his journey could be replacing his arm with from Galra tech to some sort of like other type of tech or something like that. But maybe that's just crazy. But I suppose, Greg, what are your thoughts more on kind of Shiro and the Black Lion as like the key one who might be changed?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, out of all of them, he would be the one that I could see actually being changed just because of, I don't know, he definitely, just because he's been with the Gara for whatever period of time, it definitely seems like he's been compromised in some way. I mean, regardless of the arm itself, it just seems like he, as much as he is, does seem to be sort of the natural leader, the natural sort of selection out of all of them, just because he has the most experience to be sort of the Black Lion. It definitely seems like he has, some issues that he has to sort of work out. And, with this, development at the end of the season, it definitely seems like, for most people that this would be sort of a shock to their sort of system. So it'll definitely be sort of interesting to see how, what route they actually choose to take that on. Like if he, just decides himself that, and it seems like something that his character would do, that he just, maybe just isn't right for the position and definitely has to do something to sort of figure out where he's actually at. Or maybe, he takes it to heart to actually try to go find Pidge's father and brother, just because he was with them when they got lost. So maybe that'll be sort of his sort of side arc that he has to do, and maybe Allura will step in to be the Black Paladin during that period of time until he sort of comes back and sort of can reconcile with everything. So I don't know. There's definitely sort of a lot that they can sort of do with his character, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because the thing I forgot just before I rewatched the last episode was that Shiro gains control of the Black Lion again and actually like hits Zarkon with an attack, which allows them to kind of get away while he's temporarily kind of stunned. So like he has control at the end, and it's, as I said, it's more the armor, the influence of the druids on Zarkon that allows him to take control of it. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on what they do with Shiro and the Black Lion over the course of this season?
Yeah, I kind of find it interesting because it's sort of like a subtle connection, like, in the sense that, like, you get the sense that he is almost the most connected with his lion. I do remember in that second episode when they were training and, like, everyone else kind of messed up, like the whole pulling up from the ground thing, but, like, Shiro did it, like, perfectly. That showed, like, a real connection. Or, if anything, it showed that Shiro is able to handle himself in those kind of situations, and even if he doesn't have particularly the strongest connection, because actually I think I read on a site somewhere that like Lance has the strongest connection to his lion or something like that. I could be wrong. I don't know. I remember reading that. Maybe I mixed that up with like just somebody pointing that out on Tumblr. But with Shiro, like maybe he knows how to keep his like head like calm and like be the leader in order to connect with his lion to make those choices. You know what I mean? So maybe he doesn't necessarily have like the strongest perfect connection, but he's able to cooperate very well with his lion based on his personality and based on the situation. But I could be very wrong. I don't know. But I think that's kind of the feeling I got when watching the first season. And then how they handle him getting spit out by the Black Lion, in the season finale. That was crazy, and that made you think, well, maybe he's not like the right paladin for it. But I still think he is. It's just that like he's been through a lot, which frankly you could say that the stuff he's been through is what made him be good for the Black Lion, because like before what happened to him, he just kind of was like a space. I mean, he was super cool and he was like really really talented, but he didn't really have to become like a leader or or like I don't know, like self-efficient until he was captured by the Gara and had to like survive for a year on his own. So maybe that's an odd way he has a connection to the Black Lion, is through what he went through. Like, would he still be the Black Paladin if that didn't happen to him? You know what I mean? Like, well, none of this would have happened, I guess, if this didn't happen to him. But does that make sense? Like maybe that kind of changed him in a way. Who knows? I don't really have too many other thoughts on this. I still believe he has. I still believe he is the potential. He can be the potential Black Paladin. Maybe he just has some issues with it, but he may not have the strongest connection. But I think he still deserves to be leader in some case. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it ends.
Yeah, like I really think a lot of people are kind of over exaggerating kind of how he actually Zarkon kind of took over and stuff like that. As I said, I think they at some point mentioned like the connection can't be forced, but what Zarkon seems to do in the finale is force that connection through the magic, like in terms of forcing Voltron to separate, forcing Shiro out and gaining control over it. He does it in like a forced manner as opposed to anything else because of the armor and the magic. Because again, I do put a lot of stock into the kind of visuals of the way they show kind of Shiro's mind kind of melding with the Black Line, seeing through each other's eyes moment, and that none of the other paladins have that happen in the same way. I think I saw a screenshot of it online, and it's just kind of really unusual thing where like Shiro's eyes are glowing like a different color, and the lion's eyes are glowing a different color, and it's this amazing connection thing, kind of like Avatar state kind of moment almost. It kind of feels that way. So I'm definitely kind of going with the idea that like Shiro is going to be the kind of ultimate Black Lion, but he's going to lose confidence because of what he thinks happened in the finale, and then we'll get reveals about like how exactly it ended up happening. But I think we're back around to you, Greg. What were your thoughts? What's your next talking point?
Yeah, let me see. I guess this is maybe not a huge thing, but just the fact that it even happened in the show, but just the capture of the princess at the end of, what was it, episode 10, and then the recapture of her back in episode 11, just, I guess just the whole idea that they put that in there, because it seemed like, something that would be like a really serious point, like something that could actually be like a cliffhanger at the end of the series, but just right in the next episode, they're able to sort of recover her. Just sort of that.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a little weird in that it's so like quick. It's just like, okay, end of episode 10, she's captured. End of episode 11, she's back, but they're kind of separated in the process. The mission was kind of more than they could quite finish perfectly. I get why they went for it in that they kind of went for the kind of almost like Avatar invasion during the eclipse moment, where you think the show could come to an end earlier than expected, because the reason she goes undercover, or at least attempts to, is to get this key piece of information that could like get them like close to the Galra and potentially win them the war, basically complete troop movements, and that fails, which in turn leads to Allura saving Shiro to get herself captured, and they get her back because obviously if they lose Allura, the war is basically over because she's the kind of core of the good side of the war. So I kind of like that as a kind of as I said, like Avatar eclipse invasion moment where like the heroes just about make it out, but not without kind of some loss, obviously confidence for a lot of the characters and stuff like that. It was basically a defeat that they just barely survived, and it feels a lot like that. But the big battle is still to come. And it was a cool moment, like revealing that, like especially in episode 10, that Allura is actually really skilled. She's just not used to being in like personal combat situations, so she kind of gets a little bit flustered, holds the gun the wrong way, but she's actually super strong. She can like toss like Galra soldiers around like crazy. But that still has to be revealed a little bit more, that like just how skilled is she. She seemed to more rely on the strength there as opposed to like raw skill, but that will potentially come from more of these situations. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on I suppose the potential quickness of the kind of final plot being put into place, the Allura being involved in the mission and then getting captured and them saving her in two episodes basically?
Right. That is true. When you think about it, it does kind of feel like a very last second thing to do. With her being captured in like at the end of episode 10 and then saving her in episode 11. But I kind of like that too. I can't really imagine how else I guess it's in a way where I can't really imagine what else could have happened. You bring up a really good point with comparing it to the Day of Black Sun. Like I didn't think about that, but I was like, oh, that felt a lot like the Day of Black Sun, where you like think everything's gonna be fine, and then once the older one, I guess you could say, sacrifices themselves to save Shiro or whatever. And then they all have to like do what they can to get him back, which then it almost comes like action version of the Prison Break episode. But but it's I like it. I liked how it ended. I don't really have any problem. You can argue that the last episode, that was very like. The thing about the last episode that I kind of had a problem with was not even just the part where they flew out of the portal, where they flew out of the wormhole and like went to separate. Yeah, that was rushed. That was like really fast. But you even put that into comparison to like a few minutes before that, where like everything is gone really, really badly. There's like 2 minutes left. I would even say like a minute and a half left, and then suddenly everything's perfectly fine. Like you got like Shiro suddenly comes out of nowhere, shoots our car, they all escape, and then the guy comes in and opens the shield open so they can leave. That happened so quickly. So that I have a problem with like how quickly the show ended, but the setup to it, I liked the setup to it a lot. I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was well done. That also brought up a lot of mystery with Keith. You know, the what he was doing with the magician lady or something. Or was that the last episode? Was that the last episode? I forgot. Wasn't there a part where Keith went on to look for something on his own, and he found something, and he fought the magic lady? That was episode 10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, I like how they separated that. Like, a lot of things did happen in these 2 episodes, even though the last one is where everything happens. Yeah, I don't really quite have a problem with it. Like I said, I just kind of have a problem with how, like, the last 2 minutes of the season is rushed. But I actually like the setup. I thought it was well done. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, the key thing with the quintessence in the second last episode is a kind of nice subplot, and that they give him this kind of important thing. For some reason, he just decides that he has to investigate this quintessence for some reason, which I think links into a bit from the first episode where he mentions that, like, oh, the reason I came here and happened to find Shiro is because, like, I was told to search this location for energy. So, like, he seems to have this connection to quintessence potentially, or life force energy or something like that no one else seems to have. So that's kind of the key, one of the other Keith mysteries as well, that may kind of speak to something in the future. But let's see. So are we all fully discussed this topic that we're on right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think Kelly, you have the next talking point.
Okay. I don't know if this is a talking point. It's not really a talking point, but I guess I wanted to. I don't know if it's okay if I bring this up. How about we say our favorite episodes and talk about why we like it? I know it's kind of a weird thing to bring up, but I guess, what are you guys' favorite episodes, and what do you like about them? And you can include the finales and stuff. I don't really care. The first episode's kind of complicated because it's like 1 3-hour long beginning, but that's up to you guys, however you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I suppose. Why don't you go first? Do you have yours already set, Kelly?
I do, actually. It's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. I think my favorite episode is Crystal Venom. I feel like a lot happens in that episode emotionally, but even though it is an episode without Voltron in it, that is true. And it mostly is contained in this, in the castle. Like I said, I sometimes do have an affinity for episodes that are its own thing, but still connected to the overall plot. And what I really like about Crystal Venom is I feel like the actual, like, structure and writing of that episode is really, really solid. Like, a lot is happening, but it's not too hectic, all at once. And I really like what it does with Allura. I thought it was really, really I thought it was a really powerful episode, where she's still connecting with her father, who's not even really alive, through this, like, memory machine thing, which in itself is a really interesting concept to me. That, like, he's gone, but he's not really gone, and that in itself was, like, really, really weird. And like, I don't know how, like, that would be dealt with in, like, real life and stuff like that. So I think they did a good job at addressing how that's like. And a lot of things are going on in this, even though it is kind of like a spooky, ooh, what's going on kind of episode, that wastes a little bit of time on that. You look at also the fact that, I don't remember the guy's name, but one of the Galra generals, right? One of the Galra generals is inside this tube, and they're trying to extract the memory from it. And Shiro's so determined to, like, get something out of him, and then he has this really intimidating conversation with him that freaks him out, and he actually, like, shoots him out of the ship. I was like, whoa, what the heck? How did that happen? Like, and, like, Lance almost dies. Keith saves him. Hunk and Pidge are kind of doing their own silly version of it with fighting the food. A lot of fun things happen in this episode, but a lot of emotional things happen in this episode. Like, at the end, I think I almost kind of teared up. I know it's kind of silly, but I kind of almost teared up when, like, the way that they animated and the way that they did Laura's goodbye to her father, like, after being, like, taken over by the virus and stuff. Like, something about this episode really reached to me. I felt like it was kind of a level of quality, that a higher level of quality in, like, the general. You guys could totally disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But to me, the way it looked, especially when Allura's father died, like when the thing got crushed and the light is, like, going away and she's watching her dad die or whatever, but then she's more determined than ever to stop Zarkon, and it's like a really good ending. I love this episode a lot. I think it stood out to me compared to the others. I know that's kind of weird, but that's just how I feel. So yeah.
This is a really weird question, because it's one of those things where, like, I don't think any of the episodes just yet have been, like, completely, like, absolutely amazing. I think probably the best episode is probably the last one, just because the reveal about Zarkon and what they do with that is so important and kind of changes the nature of what's going on, that, like, suddenly the villain becomes super interesting, whereas like before the Galra we're just like, okay, there's some interesting stuff with the whole druid tech theme, but you're still just a kind of evil alien species, whereas this presents like a lot of interesting ideas, but I don't think it's like the best kind of, I suppose, mid-season finale ever. I'd almost say like my favorite episode is Return of the Gladiator, just because I feel it's a fairly contained episode, but it kind of presents a bit of everything that the show is. You get the big fight like with the lions, and then Voltron. I think that's the one where you get one of the first big power ups with the sword of Voltron. You get like a big reveal at the end that like Semdak is still alive, and more the emotional moments with like Shiro and Pidge and stuff like that. So that's a fairly kind of an episode that I like, that kind of covers a little bit of everything. You also have the Erusians and getting to know the people of that planet. So early episode, but that's one that I felt was kind of, it presents kind of what the show is about fairly well in just one episode. But definitely a tough question. It's probably between Return of the Gladiator and the last episode, the Black Paladin. But Greg, what would be your favorite episode?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's only so many episodes, and I definitely would say that the later episodes definitely are sort of stronger just because you get sort of the full idea of, what the show's doing, and you get more of the themes and the plots and all that stuff. So, I mean, 10 and 11 are definitely just faves just because of what sort of, entails in them. But I guess, one of the earlier episodes that I like, and I did actually like 3 as well. But I also like the second episode of Some Assembly Required, just because we get to sort of start to see, the actual team sort of form together, see how they're actually sort of going to work as a full unit of 5, and just, them sort of understanding their lines a bit more and their sort of abilities, as well as, just seeing how Allura works with Quran, and just sort of the whole sort of dynamic that this group sort of starts to have together. I really like that sort of aspect as far as a early episode.
Mm. The only thing with that episode was that like watching it again, I was just like, when they have that big sequence where they're like, "Go to your lines, everyone." It's just like 3 or 4 minute long sequence where they show them like so complicated from the central room in the castle. They jump onto these kind of like rope things, and they slide down from there into these speeder things that they use in other episodes. They pilot them through the castle to like another section, jump through a chute and into Voltron. It's like the most complicated way ever to get to their lines. Just them all having these like 5 systems for them all individually, and it made for a cool scene in the music, but it's just a little bit like, that is very complicated how they did it. But, that's just a funny moment in that episode. My next talking point, I suppose, getting more kind of character focused here. I want to talk about the reveal that Paige is a girl, and kind of how they actually approach doing that. This is obviously one of the key things like that we struggle to like not spoil, because obviously it's just like, once you know she's a girl, you always, okay, girl, she, and we just kept saying that during the previous podcast, and I had to kind of edit those bits out. For me, the reveal that Paige is actually, like Katie Holt, and she's the sister of Matt and the daughter of Commander Holt. It's a bit of a weird one in that ultimately, like, it ends up like they don't treat it as being in any way important. It just kind of is presented to us that like most of the characters, apart from Lance, basically none of them really had any like reaction to it. Like Allura, I suppose, finds it a little bit before Lance, and so it ends up being that like Allura and Lance were the only people who like didn't know. And even then, before she actually admits to them all that she's a girl, you have like other moments that set it up, like the picture that like they show, and like there's this person who looks like Pidge, but obviously they look very different, and this girl who they kind of say is like Pidge's girlfriend, but it's obviously later revealed that she is the girl and Matt is the boy in that picture. And then even before that, a moment I completely missed in a previous episode was that at the end of Return of the Gladiator, Shiro kind of talking to Paige basically calls her Katie, and there's this kind of big like, oh, moment, and that you see Allura's mice there, and that's how the mice find out and then tell Allura in the next episode and set it up. So it's this kind of reveal that is set up over the course of a bunch of episodes, and then they just really casually have her say it at the start of one of the episodes that like, yeah, actually I can't man up, I'm a girl, and then you just get the reaction. I suppose part of the problem is that they don't present a kind of strict enough situation that she actually like has to kind of pretend to be a boy, because we know girls can be part of the Galaxy Garrison, and she does enough with her disguise that like I think she could have just remained a girl. I sort of get why she went down that road, but it's just a little bit of a weird reveal as to why they kind of focused so much on it and then ultimately made the reveal not really mean anything. And then there's still some confusion after that about the fact that when we see her as Katie, she's not wearing glasses, but then as Paige she wears glasses and they're part of the disguise, but she continues to wear them. Obviously, like we assume contact lenses or something like that, but it's just a weird one to me that they focused on it so much. But Greg, what were your thoughts on the reveal that Paige is actually Katie Holt?
Yeah, I mean, they set it up, and it's, I don't know, even without knowing that it's not completely, not out of the norm that would be a possibility. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I don't really mind the way that they did it. I mean, I guess it gets, a little bit of laughs just because of, Lance somehow not being, of course, him being the one that isn't able to actually see through her disguise. So I don't know. I mean, I think really the problem is sort of like what you said. It's just the fact that they didn't really sort of make anything of it, and I don't know. Maybe they were just sort of trying to downplay, just make it seem like not a big deal that she's a girl or anything, since it's not really that much of an issue with with how they they're setting up this world here. So I don't know. It is a bit sort of weird here, but I think it was nice how they all just sort of accepted it and just sort of went along with it.
Like I love the story of like she really wants to investigate what happened and doesn't kind of believe what happened, and then discovers little bits of information that like, wait, you actually lied in the news report about what actually happened to them. There's no like explosion or anything like that. There's no report of that, so she has hope that they're still out there, and it's still an ongoing plot about her finding those two who we know were sent to some sort of a labor camp somewhere in the Galra Empire. So they're definitely, I assume still alive. They never confirmed the deaths of them, so I assume there's still a little bit more to come. But I suppose going forward, it's like I still think there's a little bit more to this plot to go on, because the only notable, I suppose, change is that she becomes a little bit more confident after getting the secret out, and that she is more comfortable around everyone. Makes a little bit more jokes around people, like she teases Hunk about Shay being Hunk's girlfriend and stuff like that. But Kelly, what were your thoughts on the Paige is Katie reveal?
Yeah, it is really interesting. And you do bring up a good point that she does get a little bit more confident after the reveal. Like, I noticed that too. Like, she was slightly different, like more like comfortable in saying certain things instead of being kind of awkward about it. Like she's still awkward in a lot of ways, but like not as awkward as maybe that conversation she had with Alora, where it's just like, I like peanuts, but I mean I like peanut butter and peanut cookies, but I don't like peanut butter because or whatever the conversation was. You get the joke. I thought that was a really funny part. Like that she was that like thick at, like, she's smart, but she was that thick at realizing that Allura was talking about her being a girl. Yeah, the reveal was kind of odd. I think the weirdest thing to me, the reveal in episode 6 where she just kind of tells everybody, that did happen out of nowhere. I remember when I was watching it, I was like, oh, are we doing this now? Okay. Like, it kind of happens out of nowhere. I guess it did really kind of stick out to her that, they said man up, and that in itself is kind of a stupid thing to say, because it's like, women can be powerful too. So I like how she's like, well, I can man up because that's a metaphorical saying, but because it's about being tough. I kind of understood why she revealed it then, and I felt like, based on the situation that they were in, having to go save the Galra, she didn't really want to keep any more secrets. So I get that, but at the same time, it did kind of come out of nowhere. It was like the beginning of the episode. It kind of happened really quickly. Everyone had their kind of typical reactions of, oh, I already knew. And then you had that one person who was like, what? Like, that whole, wish they kind of handled it a little less generically. But it was funny, but like, I kind of predicted how the reaction was going to go. I was like, you're going to think, I mean, you guys all knew already. Lance is probably going to be surprised. And it went exactly how it went. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but even more confusing than that to me was like the logic behind it, in the sense that I think I talked to you guys about this after the podcast last time. I thought I kind of figured it out like episode 1, like at the end of episode 1. I mean, at the end of episode 3, everyone figures it out, which Morgan, you said you missed that part with Shiro calling her Katie.
Yeah, I must have just like temporarily tuned out the
Oh,
first time I
okay.
watched it during that
So that
line.
must have been really weird for you in like episode 6. So you're like, what? She's a girl, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, did you
I
only find out at
I,
the end?
I think I'd figured it out more or less from the picture.
Right, you had figured it
Or
out by the picture, which is the point that I wanted to bring
yeah,
up with the fact that the picture like makes no sense because not that it makes no sense, but they created an obvious realization here for the audience in that they have this picture and you think that's Pidge with her with a girlfriend or obviously not a girlfriend, maybe like a little sister or something, right? I got the idea that that was his little sister, but then at the end of episode 1 when they're on the Galra ship, Pidge is like, my family is missing, my brother and my father were on this mission, and I was like, well, she says older brother too, nonetheless. And I was like, wait, older brother picture looks exactly like each other. Okay, she's the little sister. Like,
yeah.
use logic. You know what I mean? It wasn't that hard to point out. And then she, in episode 2, she thinks about picture again. So you can even get a better look at it, even though it's like kind of blurry because it's like part, you know what I'm talking about.
That's why she was so protective of like not wanting people in her mind during the psychic connection section
Yeah,
of the
because she didn't
training.
want to figure it out. Yeah, and that's that's to me that's when I figured it out. But then we figured it out at the end of episode 3 when he calls her Katie. But then like 2 episodes later, suddenly she reveals it, and that is kind of weird. But to me that was my biggest problem with it, was like you kind of knew already because the way you do deductive reasoning, it's not, you don't got to be Sherlock Holmes to figure that out. I don't know. I wish they handled that better, but I actually love the concept. And I actually liked the end of episode 3. I liked how it was sweetly done at the sunset. He's like, we're gonna find your family, Katie, and she doesn't say anything. She's kind of like, and he's like, don't worry, I'll keep you secret. And like they don't like say anything to each other really after that. I kind of like how that was done. I liked how that reveal was done, but the one with her just telling everybody, while it made sense to the story and her character, it was kind of just done in a really generic way.
Yeah, I suppose the thing people are discussing right now going forward, of course, is that like again the whole glasses thing. Like, does she actually need the glasses? Is it just part of the disguise? Like, why does she still have them after revealing that she's a girl? And people wondering like, will they ever like do anything to emphasize that she's a girl going forward now that she doesn't need to keep the secret? Like, will she like bring? I think that she wears a hairband and that we see in the flashback, and will they like just bring a little bit kind of more of like that out to kind of show that she's much more comfortable now around the group being a girl and doesn't need to like look like a boy or something like that. Like there's obviously back and forth about like it's cool them just keeping her the same, or should they actually do something to more emphasize that? It's obviously kind of debate about if you want that or not, but
now my 2 cents on that, I kind of agree and don't like I wouldn't mind if they kept it the same, but at the same time I'm not 100% sure. Like, actually, when watching it, it kind of makes it almost confusing because even though she's voiced by a girl, she doesn't sound really that feminine, which is fine. I don't care, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you watch it, you do kind of forget that she is a girl. And she is, obviously, but like I think the way, since we started the show thinking she was a boy, and like even though you have all this plot development about like her really being a girl, she stays and sounds exactly the same as she was in the first episode. So then you kind of, it's weird, and honestly, it's not something we should, that's like it's not an issue by any means, but if they did want to go the route with her being more confident in herself and wanting to be like more feminine like she was when younger, or maybe not, but if they do decide to go that route, they can make her hair longer. She doesn't have to keep her hair cut. Yeah. So I was thinking they'd make her hair a little bit longer, just enough, and styled in a way just enough to make it like you remember. Because I think the biggest problem is the hair. Not problem. Okay, worded that wrong. I meant one of the reasons why you sometimes forget that she is a girl is because the hair is so like not like it's like cut like your typical anime boy hair, you know what I mean? And that's like the one thing that kind of distracts me from it. So if she grows her hair out again, since that's like the one thing she seemed like she really didn't want to do. Remember in the flashback, she was like, oh man, I gotta cut my hair just to get the hair. So but then she did it like a Mulan thing, so I think to me it would be cool if in like season 2 she grows her hair out a bit and maybe have that headband again. I don't know.
Yeah, like I think that's what I'd like to do if they are going to do something like that, like longer hair, green hairband, green paladin. Like just subtle little thing. They don't have to like go crazy and like all this sort of stuff, but just something like that. But I suppose, Greg, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they should change their design going forward? If we are potentially going to get a bit of like time of them apart, is this going to be something they perhaps emphasize?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if they do like a sort of a huge sort of time difference thing, however they want to work it out with space or whatever, I mean, I guess I could see them potentially changing up her character. I mean, they could change up all the character designs a little bit if, enough time has gone by. But I mean, overall, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily needed right now. I mean, I guess, if it really, if it's something that sort of fits with her character that she would want to sort of change her style back to the way it was before to make it more feminine or not. I think that could work out pretty interesting just because of how the show sort of is, showing her character off. But I don't think it's something that they necessarily have to do just because, now everyone knows that she's a girl.
Yeah, because I suppose the only other thing is just that like when they did show her in flashback, it's not like she was like wearing like and looking like a super tomboy. Like she was wearing like dresses and stuff like that. So it's it to me it would kind of make some sense that maybe they begin to kind of incorporate aspects of her being more confident with being a girl, but uh, I don't. It doesn't really matter, of course, but maybe that's something we'll find out at the panel coming up. They might show concept art of potential second half of season two designs, or them changing something up a little bit. But we'll have to, of course, wait and see. I suppose the final thing I just want to say on that is just that I'm actually surprised they didn't really have another scene between Paige and Allura because, as kind of Kelly noted, it was a pretty awkward scene when they talk, and that's pretty much the only time they talk. And as like the two kind of female members of the group, I thought like they'd perhaps do something more than that. Like she mentions at the end, like just so you know that you can always come to talk to me about stuff, and like implying because we're girls, but they don't really have another scene between them. So maybe they'll have that in the second half of the season. There is something more with that in that again, as they emphasize in that conversation, they're both quite similar in that they're both kind of have lost their family in some way, and that could be some way to help each other. But the actual plot I did quite like the whole Galaxy Garrison are having to go undercover, and especially kind of them kind of giving her a bit of a character arc of almost coming across as a little bit like overly into her own mission to get to find information about her family, putting that against the being a paladin, almost that she it's almost that she didn't have faith in everyone else that they would help her. That it's obviously like they're close, they're team Voltron, of course they're gonna at times help her get information on her family, but she felt that she had to leave to do that on her own, and it's a kind of key part of the group and part of that episode that she kind of helps defend the castle and kind of stays and kind of becomes part of that team and realizes that this is her new family. So not just the girl reveal, also the kind of character arc bit that they had there, I thought was pretty well done. But Greg, we're back around to you again. So what's your next talking point?
Let's see. I don't have too many more left. I guess this is, I guess, more just the idea about the whole show and just how it was sort of produced, but just sort of the idea of, how the show or how we sort of watch the show compared to, how we normally watch the show, week by week or whatever. Just the whole idea of just, I guess, sort of binging this whole show, and the fact that it's not even the whole, first season, is actually only half of the first season. Just that sort of process, and if it, sort of changed anything as far as, keeping that your ideas on sort of the plot storylines, if it made it easier or harder or however.
Yeah, and I think after experiencing a few Netflix shows like this, I do wish they would do something where they kind of maybe not just release the whole season, but release like a couple of episodes at a time, just to allow that discussion time between episodes. Because I feel that the one problem with this is that it's basically just a kind of couple of day period where the main discussion about these episodes happens. Then after that, it kind of falls off because everyone's seen them. They watch them all in the same sitting, basically. And there's no like discussion of individual episodes because then you can have to force this situation where like, okay, if we want to do podcast reviews for these episodes, over the course of like a 11-week period, we will only watch one episode at a time so we're not spoiled on what happens going forward. It takes away some of the speculation and makes it so that almost like episode cliffhangers don't mean anything because you're going to immediately go into the next episode. So like the format of the way they're actually producing these episodes as episodes kind of is not really needed because of the format that they're actually releasing them in that the cliffhangers between episodes don't really mean anything. So I'm not the biggest fan of just like everything at once. It's cool to get everything at once and that like just watching it, but like if you actually want to discuss it, I think it kind of takes away in that realistically for us to discuss the whole thing, we kind of have to do it like this because we'd be referring to everything just in trying to talk about one episode, because it's ultimately all connected, and so that's part of the thing. I think especially if the Voltron fandom wants to become a really big thing, I think discussion about individual episodes kind of needed to be a big thing to just build the hype, whereas it almost is at the stage now where the hype is gone and the show's only been out a couple of days and weeks, and we're only just going to find out about what's coming up next shortly. Them splitting up by like the halfway point, I think, is probably their way of kind of trying to build some hype, and that obviously there is going to be a toy line for this, and we assume the toy line is going to be released concurrently with the second half of the season 1B, season 2, whichever way you want to call it. So that could help things, but it's for me, I'm not the biggest fan of the Netflix style releasing stuff. But Kelly, what's your take on the release format for this show?
Right. Yeah, it is kind of a problem in a way. I hear a lot of people talk about this, not obviously not just with Voltron, but with Netflix in general, just the concept in general of releasing an entire season at once. It's like releasing a movie. It's like releasing an extended movie and then waiting the length it usually makes to make another movie. Well, maybe a little less. It's about a year, right? About a year for the next season to all come out at once. And it's such a weird new thing of doing things. And like, I'm kind of someone who likes to embrace different forms of watching formats. Like, who's to say what the perfect way to watch something is? They just did it weekly based on, like, why did they have to do it weekly in the first place? Was it really for story structure? Was it because, broadcasting needed to be done that way? They needed to finish the next episode. I'm not saying that that's a problem. I'm not saying watching it weekly is a problem. I'm saying it in itself is interesting to think about. What's the best way to watch something? You know what I mean? Like, how much time in between each thing? So like reading a book, picking it up every once in a while, like 1 or 3 days, or is that uneven? Or is that uneven and you want to just watch it, consistently once every day or once every week, or just watch it all once? I don't know the answer. I don't know if somebody should figure out the answer, because I actually feel like someone probably should figure out the answer to that, because it does create some problems. You know what I mean? And with Netflix, while it's really cool to watch everything at once and really have a great fun time at one time, if you have the time for it, which, by the way, if you don't, you can always watch it later without having to wait for the next episode. So that's another thing that a lot of people love about it, and I think is a merit for it. But like you said, a lot of hype goes away. I mean, this fandom is pretty strong, I'll tell you that. You go on Tumblr, at least from what I've seen, this fandom is like, I don't want to say it's huge, but it is like bashing it, you know what I mean? And which is really cool. Like they're constantly making things and constantly talking about things, which is really, really nice. Which is awesome. And the show's been out for like about a month, right? A little bit over a month, still going strong as if it just came out. So that's cool. But like you said, it without any new content, for as long as we're not going to have any new content, it's not fun. It's not easy, you know what I mean? And it's not, and it does ruin the hype a little bit. And it kind of, and I remember, I haven't done this in a really long time, but I don't think I've watched a show I've had to wait for weekly in a very long time outside of some anime I'm watching right now, like Boku no Hero Academia and Hunter x Hunter. And it's interesting finally watching a show again where I have to wait for an episode every week. I kind of dread it, but I also like it because it's like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next week, or I have time to think about it. You know what I mean? But with Voltron, I just watched it all in one day. I watched that whole show in one day in one sitting. And when I watched it again, I realized that I had like mentally missed a lot because I was probably exhausted from some of the binging I was doing, that I was like, oh, that completely went by me. I must have missed that somehow. So you kind of get into this state of, I love what I'm watching, but am I really absorbing what I'm watching? When you binge watch something. And that's what I realized the biggest problem with Netflix is yes, you're having a lot of fun, possibly even more fun than a weekly thing, and you are loving it, but then you're like, what did I just watch once it's over? Yeah. Like once it's over, you're like, what happened? What did I just experience? Like same thing happened to me with Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Well, maybe not as much, but I also binge watched Jessica Jones in like 2 days. And I barely remember what happens in that, but you think about it and you're like, whoa, I went through that so quickly, I kind of can't remember everything. With a weekly thing, you have time to absorb what happens and talk about what happens with one episode every week.
Yeah.
So that's my analysis on the situation. No idea what's better or worse. I feel like they both have their merits, but I don't know.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking back to like Korra book 3 when it aired. Remember, like when that first premiered, we got 3 episodes the first day they came out, and it was such a struggle to review those because we're like, wait, 3 episodes at once, and like we're gonna get 2 the following week and then 2 the following week after that, and it was just this kind of really punishing schedule trying to cover it, and I think that's part of the reason why like book 3 is still the book of Korra where I don't remember the most from because of the schedule at which they released it, because it's just like the first 3 episodes completely blend together. I only remember certain aspects of them, and it's kind of similar with this in that like I would have loved to have an experience with Voltron where we could get to an episode like Talking Flight and you have that one line of dialogue from Zarkon where he talks about how I know better than anyone the power of Voltron, and just see the fandom just speculate just on that line of dialogue, and that like what's going on here. Does that mean he was part of Voltron? Did he help create Voltron? Like that sort of speculation goes away because everyone 2 hours later got to the final episode and knows that Darkon's the Black Paladin, and so it really takes away a lot of the middle. It takes away a lot of the more setup pieces of kind of the show, because immediately, like in this discussion, we're going straight to the big plot points in general. Like we're probably not going to discuss like 50% of the show because the show is all out and everyone knows what it's like, instead of having to focus. Like we haven't really talked about a lot of the specifics of the Balmera episodes, just because there's 4 of them, they're separated. We've already covered the Balmera as a whole, but it just it's frustrating, I think, overall. And I could just imagine like if they had all 26 episodes released at once, that would have been just insane. Like 26 episodes at once is way too much, I think, to release at once. So we're frustrated at where it's ended off so far, but I honestly think 26 at once would have been even worse. But Greg, any thoughts yourself on this?
I don't know. I mean, I think it definitely is interesting, just the way that you can sort of process the information of the show, and in that sort of method. I mean, for me, I think I did it in 3 different sittings. I think is how I watched it this time. And then when I rewatched it, I think I did it pretty much all in one. No, I did it over a couple of days too. So I don't know. For me, I definitely like to space it out myself. But I mean, as far as review and sort of discussion, it definitely makes it a lot sort of harder. So the fandom and in general can have a harder time sort of watching it. But I don't know. I think as long as the show sort of keeps it going with updates, like for this show, we know that there's more information coming at SDCC, and we know there's another half coming now. After that, how long does it take for the real sort of season 2 to begin? That will sort of, I guess, sort of dictate how interested people are in it, and if the fandom can survive over extended period of time of no episodes not coming out sequentially. That'll be interesting to see how that's sort of viewed. But I don't know, I think it definitely can sort of work either way. I mean, for a lot of shows, I mean, they're just, I don't know, it seems like they're almost designed in this sort of way. Maybe they're more more long form, like almost more like a movie rather than episodic, even though this one clearly is. So I don't know, it's definitely different, and it does seem to be the way that a lot more shows are going now. So maybe this is just sort of how TV shows overall are sort of evolving into.
Yeah. I suppose for Netflix, it's kind of a hard one to kind of really speculate on, and that like, is it better business for them to be like, okay, we're going to release this episode, this kind of show weekly, like we're going to have a thing at like every Friday at this specific time, we'll put this episode up on the service, and is that better than just here's it all? Like which generates more money for them, which gets more people subscribing to Netflix? I don't know, like to me initially it makes more sense in that like you do it weekly, because Netflix is a monthly thing. So if you air Voltron over the course of like a week, that's like people have to subscribe for at least like 3 months basically to get all the episodes. So like I think that would make them more money, rather than like, okay, it's up, people get the free trial for the first month and watch it, and then wait until like the show comes back like a year later and then kind of resubscribes or whatever. So that's my take on it. There's probably much smarter people in Netflix who kind of have a better view on this, but I don't know. I suppose that yeah.
Sorry, no, I wanted to put my thoughts into that. I kind of get what you're saying, but I would kind of argue against that because I feel like you would lose a lot of trust in the audience from that way. Meaning, like, people would feel like they'd have to subscribe the next month in order to continue watching a show. I think the reason why the format that Netflix has chosen is so popular. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best way to tell a story, but I think the reason why right now, I don't know about the future, but for right now, it's such a big hit for them and a very good formula for them because they're getting a lot of views and subscribers. Like, they're very popular right now, is because they released it all at once. And I think that's because they don't feel like they're going to have to constantly keep resubscribing to continue getting the content that they want. They get it all at once and then you watch it. And there's so much on Netflix that you don't really feel like you need to get rid of your subscription just to wait for the show to come out again next year, unless you like are 100% sure there's nothing else on Netflix you're interested in. Then you're like, well, yeah, then Netflix would lose that subscriber until the show comes back. But I don't think that's necessarily how it works because a lot of people with the Netflix account have a lot of family members and they use it too. And then they have there's like I think you can have a limit of 5 family members using Netflix at once, and they have shows they want to watch all on one Netflix account. So I think it is a formula that they want. I think they're doing a good job with that. Will that stick around? I don't know. Maybe people would finally get sick of the fact that a show only comes out once every year, all at once, and then Netflix will have to change up their formula. But for now, I feel like they know what they're doing business-wise, that they're getting a lot of views from the kind of format that they're doing. But you're not wrong in that some people might leave because the show goes away. But I think for the most part, this is what people want right now. They want all of it immediately, content right now, and that could change, but
yeah, I suppose ultimately it's basically like what like a casual fan interested in Voltron wants versus what a person involved in the fandom wants. Like us as Avatar fans doing a podcast, of course, like I think most of our experience is discussing the show as opposed to almost the show itself. Like we've spent more time probably discussing it than actually like just watching it multiple times. Whereas I think you're probably right in that like most people will just like, oh, I have Netflix, Voltron, it's all there. Wait until more Voltron, and they don't really care about like, oh, I really want to discuss episode 1 specifically with these people. But that's just the thing they have. That's why for me the toy line, it's going to be really interesting to see how that sells, because I think people are interested because Voltron is a very like toyetic kind of franchise, and that like it's toys of robot lines that combine together. That's really cool. Like when Transformers a couple of years back brought back combiners, they sold really well. So this makes complete sense that it would do well. But given the release schedule of this, in that it's basically just Voltron season 1 is out now, it's basically going to be, first quarter 2017 when the toys comes out. That's like at least half a year, if not more, since that. And when exactly is the second half of the season coming out? Like, how exactly do they advertise a toy line for a show on Netflix is kind of a little weird to me. I suppose it's going to be interesting to see how that sells, because like Bionicle has a show on Netflix right now, but that is a toy line first and a show second. This is the other way around. So just if this maintains the hype and is successful on the toy aisles, I think that will be a big telling point. But we'll have to wait and see on that. We don't really know when they're going to reveal the toys. But I suppose next talking point, Kelly, I think we're on to you. What is your next talking point?
Right. Did the podcast just get like 3 times louder? Or was that just me? Wait, that was weird. All right, sorry. Really?
No, I didn't notice anything.
Okay. I don't know. For some reason, my computer just got like 3 times louder. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. I was trying to think of like talking points like in between my last talking point. I don't know how to word this one. I guess I wanted to talk about the connection between the paladins and their lions and like how the show addresses it, because I feel like it does and doesn't, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like they talk in the first episode, you have Allura presenting everyone their lions and like why their lions are like good for them and stuff like that, like why they're the fit with their lions. But then it's never really kind of brought up again. I mean, you have character development, and you have like you see the traits that Allura talked about, with like Pidge being smart and daring, in episode 4 and 5. Well, 5 mostly, where she's like saving Shiro and everyone. Keith, not Keith, Hunk being caring and holding everybody up during the whole Balmera situation, wanting to save everybody. Like, you get traits of them and stuff like that, but I guess I wanted more of, like, what really makes the Lions and their Paladins connect to each other. I made a whole post about what, like, Lance and the Blue Lions connections probably are. Like, I made a whole analysis post. That's one of the reasons I rewatched the show, was just try to get that more, because it bothered me so much for some reason that she skipped over him. And then I was like, wait, now it's incomplete. Like, I wanted it to be like complete. Like, I wanted the understanding of what Voltron is as a unit based on their personalities and what they need to function to be more complete to me. And when we didn't get that for Lance, I was like, oh, but what is it all mean? So like I made a whole like thing about that. I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on how the show handles like why they're connected to their Lions, and what it really means for the Lions to have these different personalities to like make Voltron?
I just will say pretty quickly before we get into the discussion, the Blue Line does have a fact file up on the website, which basically just says it's kind of bringing people together, kind of personality, friendship type situation, which I think is what we kind of agreed upon in the last podcast, that's probably what it is. So that basically is what it is, and it kind of fits.
You can all read my post on it. Avatar Gemini. I don't know what tag it would be under. I'll share it later. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting in how they do it, and that, as I said, beyond that Shiro moment where they kind of show the connection of like, basically Shiro with his eyes closed is seeing through the eyes of the Black Lion. They don't really establish what the connection is beyond the fact that the Lions are sentient but can be controlled by the pilot, but can also send information that is not just like computer style information back to the pilots, and that like the whole Bayard power of the Lions as part of Voltron, but also outside of Voltron, the Lions tell them that. Like the sword of Voltron, the Red Lion tells Keith like, put the Bayard here, and that's how you use the sword. So it's a very simple connection. Like, here's a super power up, just insert your weapon in here. Which is basically the kind of Power Ranger power up in the Megazords, depending on which Power Ranger version you're talking about. So that's interesting, but yeah, they don't really emphasize any sort of a kind of spiritual connection, like life force connection, as much as they do really early on, all that much, apart from like in the heat of battle, they gain these powers, their Lions tell them at the right moments when like these kind of power-ups are kind of available, and that like there is that one episode, I think it's the end of the kind of Balmera thing where they begin their attack, where like just suddenly every Lion gets a power-up. It's just like Lance has ice powers, Keith has fire powers, and it's just like, oh yeah, and the jaw blade for the Black Lion, they just get them, and it's just like, could you not have like done something to explain why this power up happened? So that's why I think a potential training arc at the start of the second half of the season is going to be like important to just get across the importance of that connection, especially with Zarkon kind of putting that into like question of this, like, you are inexperienced pilots of your Lions compared to me. You are weak because of that like they don't have experience, and their connection isn't as strong. So that's definitely something they still have to delve into, and the early episodes kind of present that to us, that they kind of, I don't think any of them have fully embraced that as much as they perhaps should have. They are, I think, most of them treating them more as kind of machinery rather than beings, which I think is kind of a mistake. But at the same time, they kind of reveal that like Alfor created Voltron is just kind of like, how does that work? And that they're alive, but robots, but they can be controlled, but they're actually living things on their own. But Voltron itself isn't actually like a separate entity that seems to be completely controlled by the Paladins. But the Lions themselves can still kind of give hints as to what to do. It's weird, and they definitely need to address it more for sure. But Greg, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something that they can expand upon, and your whole idea with the whole training arc seems like the perfect way that they would actually sort of explain the actual connection that they have with the Lions, because there is something there, as we can see, and they hint at it here and there, but we don't really see the full extent of it, which I think it seems like a decent plot line that they would go through just so we can see it, and just to give the Paladins more experience in general, and just it's always cool to see when they actually do have those extra sort of abilities. And now that we can see that there's beyond like their first sort of initial, I guess, sort of secondary abilities, they can have one sort of beyond that. I think it's definitely something cool, and can maybe that'll lead them to how they're actually going to sort of survive in this sort of battle. So I think it's definitely something that they need to explore overall to show the connection that they have, and maybe that can also sort of explain how other people can have connections with the Lions themselves as well, especially sort of Zarkon and the Black Lion. So I think it's definitely something pretty cool that they can explore.
But Kelly, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up because that's like one of the aspects of the show that I kind of found most interesting, but they also covered the least of. Not the least, but Morgan, you brought up a great point. They all just suddenly get their powers on the Balmera, and you're like, wait, but why? How? Because with Keith, even Keith, you have to wonder what in that moment made him like get that sword. Like, oh, I guess my lion is giving me a weapon now. Cool. Like, it's like they don't even really understand what they're working with entirely here. Yeah, they have like a mental connection. Lance more than like we only really saw that with Lance with like knowing what the lion was gonna go do. And maybe with Shiro, with the dive bomb thing, and maybe some other moments I'm missing. But for the most part, we haven't seen really the best connect like them actually like it's more like machinery, like you said, and we know that the lions kind of have a consciousness, so you have to wonder like that's why I want this training arc too. That's why I want season 2 to kind of go into a little bit of more connect. Like they have to work with their lions to figure out what they got to do to get everyone back together. You know what I mean? I think that would be really, really good for the show. Yeah, like, and just for the characters, to show off their strengths and like how they could connect with the idea of Voltron. It would do a lot of the show good, in my opinion, to have that. And I don't know, it's just one of the things that I like about these kind of shows is like figuring out like why these things work and why it's important to said characters. It's good character development, but it's also good plot development because then like Greg said, we'll find out maybe why Zarkon and the Black Lion did work or didn't work. It would overall be an improvement to the show because I know we got a story here. We have to stop the bad guys from like destroying taking complete control over the galaxy. Bad things keep happening so that we don't have a lot of time to focus on that. But I feel now that they're all separated, we can focus on that now. It's okay. They just stopped the Galra for a little bit. So let's hope that they do that instead of trying to rush back into the plot immediately. At least that's my thoughts on it.
I suppose my ability kind of my next point links off that, and that's just kind of like abilities that they kind of still have to show. So I think the most obvious ones are that each Paladin's Bayard activates a new weapon for Voltron. So we've seen what the red Bayard does, that forms the sword. The yellow Bayard forms the shoulder cannon. But we haven't seen what the Bayards for the other three do. Like, why doesn't Lance plug his in and get something new? Why doesn't Pidge, what does her Bayard do? And then the obvious kind of big plot point of like, Zarkon still has the Black Bayard. Will Shiro ever get it back? What does that do? And then potentially like, what does activating 2 at the same time do? All 5 at the same time? Is it just all of the weapons at once, or does it unlock something super special, kind of Avatar State Voltron edition or something like that? Like, it's this crazy power thing. The lions individually have abilities in that Keith's has 2, fire laser and the giant cannon it gets at the end. Lance has an ice cannon. The Black Lion has the jaw blade. Hunk doesn't get a special ability as far as we're aware. Like, his line is strong and like tough, but like he doesn't get like a land-based ability because he's the guardian of land as the Yellow Lion. So like, unless he can create like sandstorms at some point later on, it's going to be interesting to see what that does. Pidge kind of alters the Green Line to have cloaking, but it doesn't seem like that's a natural ability of the Green Line, so we haven't really seen that. And then the Black Line, of course, I think probably has something more to it in that I think he's the guardian of air, so there's air-based abilities for the Black Line still to come. So there's that, and then Zarkon with the Bayard kind of implies that you can transform it effectively into whatever you want, in that he has like a sword, a big sword, an extending sword, a hammer, a small gun, and a giant cannon, whereas the others just have like like grappling hook knife thing. Lance has a blaster, so there's much more that they can do, potentially hinting that they can all have like a melee weapon and a kind of uh, long range weapon and stuff like that. So that's the sort of stuff they could do in like a training arc here. Reveal a bunch of new powers that they can use, and hopefully make them more meaningful than the way they reveal the powers so far. But Greg, any thoughts on like future powers we could see based on like what abilities we have and have not seen just yet?
Um, I'm not sure specifically any what the powers would be. I mean, they're definitely going to expand on them. I don't know. I mean, I think all of them should have, another sort of secondary ability. Like I would hope that they would all sort of get some sort of secondary ability, something that would be pretty cool to see. I don't know. I mean, this is something that I definitely would see coming into play in this sort of training arc, if that's sort of what they're going to do for the next half season. Is just sort of how they can sort of, even if it's maybe not something sort of significant, but some extra connection that they have with their lines and with their Bayards, maybe even the Bayards themselves directly can have some sort of secondary sort of power up that can be transferred onto Voltron in general. I think could be definitely pretty cool. And the whole idea with Shiro and his sort of Bayard being with Zarkon right now. I mean, I don't know, maybe he can do something even now with his sort of cybernetic hand that can sort of enhance his line, maybe once he sort of gets more confident, or maybe he doesn't actually even need the Bayard if he has a strong enough connection. So there's definitely some things that they can play out with
Mhm.
the connection and their sort of
Yeah.
level up abilities, I guess.
Yeah, because I suppose like they don't really explain the Bayards beyond like it's the traditional weapon of the Paladins. Like, couldn't Shiro theoretically like build himself a new Black Bayard? In that like they don't really imply that it's like a part of the line. It's just a weapon that has an insert slot in the line. So they could do something there, or they could have him fight Zarkon to get it back. But then if he beats Zarkon enough to get the Bayard, it's a weird situation where like I have to steal the weapon from the enemy to then use against him to beat him. It's a little bit weird. But Kelly, what are your thoughts on abilities, weaponry still to come, based on what we've seen so far?
Right, yeah. It's something I haven't really thought about a lot. It's like one of the things I don't focus on enough for some reason, which is weird considering I just talked about the whole connection thing earlier. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, we know like what some of them can do and like what they have like strengths in. Like we know Lance is like good with like ice and water and stuff like that, and has the gun thing. Hunk has like he's more sturdy and stuff like that, but like you said, he doesn't have any like ground based powers. So like, well, we say that, but remember in the first episode when he like literally went like underground and like popped out from under the ground? Maybe he can like maybe there's like a drill or something on him we didn't see or something, and he can
Hmm.
like go into the ground. I feel like that would be like a really cool thing. Maybe that
Yeah.
that that could be an ability for him if it isn't already one. You know what I mean? Like how did he get through the ground in the first episode when he got his lion for the first time? He just kind of popped out of the ground. It was like, oh, okay. So he has the strength to go through like massive amounts of rock. So that's in itself cool. That in itself is like a side ability. Pitch I think is the most confusing with me because Pidge, like with the Green Lion, it's like more brains than brawn, which when you put that into perspective, you're like, well, then what is it that they can do? They did that cloaking thing, right? That was kind of cool, but also kind of weird. Like what'd you say earlier about like that was a thing Pidge did and not the lion? I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
quite understand that.
Isn't there a line of dialogue just before they use the cloaking where like Pidge says something like, "Oh yeah, I've altered
Modified
the
it,
green,
yeah.
yeah, modified the green line to do
Oh,
this." So it's not like an inherent ability of it, like it's just
oh,
an addition.
I don't know. That I felt like they shouldn't have had that line then. I don't remember that line, but I felt like maybe that could have been like a maybe it's something it already had, but Pidge made it better or
Gotcha.
something. I don't know. But hmm. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. But with Pidge, well, maybe with other abilities with Pidge would be like electricity and stuff. I feel like if you have like water, you can almost make an elemental at this point. You know what I mean? Like, which
Mm.
is weird, but I'm starting to put two and two together. You got like, Hunk is like the earth, Lance is like the water. Like maybe Pidge could be like electricity or like energy or something like that, or that like that in itself would be kind of cool. Keith just has a bunch of like kick-ass weapons. I don't know, like about him with the what it would make sense for the Red Lion to have something to do with like his heat, I guess. Does it ever in the show? No, right? We never
It
see
has
like
that heat laser.
Yeah.
oh, it does.
Fire
That's
fire
heat
heat
laser.
laser. Yeah.
There you go. It's got a laser. I completely forgot it had a laser. Okay, but that's what I mean. Like they each all have like an elemental, and then you wonder like what the heck can the Black Lion do? Avatar state. No, all the four lions. I don't know. Like, and then Shiro's, I guess, just inherently the Black Lion's inherently the strongest with his powers. Maybe like I don't know. I wanted to say like no, there's no wind in space. That's a thing that's not in space. That's something I always gotta remember. There's no air in space. Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe that's the thing I don't know about the most is Shiro. And like you said, like can't they just like make another Bayard or something like that? Like I don't know, because then are you sure the Bayards aren't exclusive to the Lions? To me it would make sense that like it makes sense that the Bayard is lost because I would imagine that the Bayard like was with the lion or whatever,
Yeah.
like made to match the lion.
Yeah.
And if Alfor was the one that made that made the Voltron,
Yeah.
couldn't Allure have asked Alfor to be like, hey, do you know how to make another one of these things? That could have been a thing, but now Alfor's gone, so that's not possible. Yeah, I don't know. It's not something I think about a lot, but I think they should incorporate it better into the show other than just we suddenly all have our powers to help with this one situation. Woo, go. You know what I mean? Maybe they can do that a little bit better and maybe with some different powers. That would be nice. But I also want them to kind of focus on developing some of the powers they already have or explaining like why they work the way they do.
Yeah, that, and I think a lot of them need to develop their like on foot combat as well. Like Lance especially hasn't really had like a big moment where he just like is amazing. Like just in combat, he just anytime he used his blaster, he just like seemed to be like random or just like hiding, and like it was Keith who was doing most of the fighting. So there's stuff like that where like okay, they have to obviously develop lion powers, but I'd also like them to become more skilled as well, and so they're able to, like so like Keith can actually Lance can actually like fight, and so we can eventually get to I suppose a moment where they just all five of them land into a Galra ship and they just like destroy it like completely all of them together, and it's not just Keith and Shiro and maybe Allura tossing people around and the others are just kind of like running around in the back doing nothing really. But because like Hunk I think could be like really amazing. He's had like one or two moments where he's used that kind of Gatling gun thing like pretty well, but he still seems to kind of hold back with it when it's like a super heavy weapon. But for me, I think that one of the things I'm most excited for is to see what ability the blue Bayard does for Voltron. Like just because I think Lance is ultimately going to have some sort of a big effect on Voltron because the blue line was the first one, and I think they have to have some sort of a big moment with him because I almost thought they'd give him like the first big Voltron power up, but they gave that to Keith with the sword. So I think a Lance moment where like there's another ability and it's this kind of crazy ice spear or something like that comes out would be pretty cool. But who knows what they'll do? Because like we're kind of running out of space on Voltron, and that like he's got a sword, a shield, a shoulder cannon. Is there going to be another shoulder weapon, and is there going to be weapons on the feet or what? I don't really know. So that's interesting. But yeah, I suppose I'm running low on topics. But I guess Greg, do you have any final talking points?
Nope, I'm out.
What about you, Kelly?
I'm pretty sure I'm out too. I kind of struggled thinking of how to word the last topic in itself. So, yeah.
Let me just look through my list here. Do I have anything else? Balmer, we've already discussed that. I suppose that the final thing is just I did really like how they kind of used the Kerberos mission as like a starting point for the series, and then made it this kind of important way of incorporating like a bunch of different characters and concepts together at the beginning, in that like obviously this is Shiro's backstory, but it also relates to kind of why Pidge is on the team, and then it presents like an ongoing story point of like where are Matt and Commander Holt, and the Kerberos, why were the Galra near there, and it creates a lot of interesting kind of situations. And the Kerberos mission obviously affects the people back at the Galaxy Garrison, in that they've just lost a group that they sent out, and it kind of affects everyone in some way, and it kind of it creates a nice starting point for the series. So I did really like how they used that, and it's obviously still ongoing as well. So Greg, how did you like the overall use of that kind of Kerberos mission as a kind of prelude into the story?
No, I thought that was pretty good. I mean, the whole idea of this being sort of like space exploration and that being sort of the main thing that sort of led all these events to sort of actually happen. And then, the return of one of those people who were on that expedition, sort of starting the journey for our main heroes who are on Earth, I think was, it's a nice sort of setup of a way of getting our heroes into space and involved in this, universal conflict that somehow Earth isn't actually aware of, but is going to be a part of in some form or fashion. So I think that was a pretty good way, and it'll be interesting to see, how that leads them, if it leads them back to Earth. I mean, that could definitely be, one of those things that because of this mission that happened, X amount of years ago, however they're going to do the timing of it, that leads them back to Earth and involves Earth in the whole universal conflict that we have here. So no, I thought that was it's a nice sort of way of leading us into everything, and being I guess basically the storyline that's going to be around for a while.
And Kelly, your thoughts on the Kerberos mission?
Yeah, now that you like bring it up, it's not something I thought about a lot, but it is a pretty fantastic way of being able to bring everything together and to start the show. Like it ties in a lot to like what's going on with the characters, but also introducing characters. Like you said with Pidge having a close connection to this mission. Bringing up the fact that the Kerberos mission was from this program from the Garrison Project or whatever, wherever they go to school, which that's how they know each other. And Keith, I don't know, like it's a really good way of doing it, and it's still an ongoing mystery too, because we don't know where Pidge's family is, but at the same time, like outside of the Pidge's family stuff, it was kind of a good way to introduce like the idea of the Galra and like what they do and why they took them and like how they're still a threat to the universe. Like it kind of managed to introduce a lot of different things based on one event, which is so funny to me because I still kind of stand by the fact that the first episode, like so many, I talked about this in the spoiler free one, about how like in the first episode so many things happen so quickly that you're kind of like, whoa, what's going on, what's happening, who are these people, you know what I mean? Like including what the Garrison Project, I'm sorry, I just forgot the name of it.
Galaxy Garrison.
The Galaxy Garrison. Yeah, but I meant like the Kerberos. I'm sorry, Kerberos.
Oh,
The Kerberos mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, have I been saying Garrison the whole time? I'm sorry. The Kerberos mission. Yeah, that. I even kind of got confused about that because I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. When I first watched this show, I either completely forgot or Netflix skipped like the first minute of the show, like where the Kerberos mission is happening, where you see Shiro and those two other characters and like how they get captured, how it's really bad for them. And then so when Shiro crashes on Earth later, I was so confused. I was like, who is this person? What's going on? So I mean, I guess that shows that you got to pay attention more to these things. So when I watched the show again, I was like, oh, this is the Kerberos mission everyone was talking about. But like I said, it was a fantastic way of like introducing things because, it's a space mission. You got character troubles for everybody. And we learn more about the Galra, what they're doing. It's still an ongoing mission for Pidge, so I liked it a lot. I thought it worked out really well, and I'm interested to see what they're gonna do with Matt and I don't know the dad's name. Pidge's family. Let's just say that. I'm very interested to see what's gonna happen with that because we don't have like any leads on that whatsoever, and maybe it would be kind of cool if like maybe when like they got separated, one of them like finds a clue about like where they are, you know what I mean, like on the planet that they're on. So I want to see them continue the story. I don't want it to be a huge focus because we already got a huge focus on it in the first season about like why Pidge is worried, who Pidge is, and why she's doing this. But I do want it to be like a very important minor plot going on in the background, and then maybe an entire episode or two dedicated to finding them or something. You know what I mean? That'd be cool.
Yeah, I can see an interesting situation where like one of them like going out of the wormhole ends up at Kerberos or something like that, where Paige I think would make sense that like she arrives at the place where like her family was taken from and potentially finds out like if there is anything notable about the planet beyond it just being a mission that the Galra kind of interrupted or anything like that. Shiro obviously would make sense if he potentially landed there. It would bring a lot of the bad memories back, given that this is where this kind of whole thing started. But I suppose, Greg, do you have any thoughts on this?
Um, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think that definitely sort of can work if they do sort of drop them back there on that planet. I don't know. I think it would be a nice sort of plot through line if they sort of kept that sort of going. So I definitely could see that as a possibility.
Hmm. Then just a final quick point is just it's something that perhaps some people are going to forget about, and I think it's important to remember that Shiro basically released Semdak from the castle. Like he ejected his cryopod out into space, so Semdak is probably going to come back at some point, and that could be a pretty big moment depending on who ends up confronting him or what, and it could be a situation where one of them ends up flying out on the planet where Semdak crashed, and we do something with him. Obviously, he's going to be a little bit underpowered without his kind of crazy Galra arm, so he may not be as big of a threat as we expect, but he's obviously still super dangerous. So, I don't know. I don't think he's the best character, but as like a reasonably okay villain, like below Zarkon, I think he's interesting enough in the kind of psychological stuff he did to Shiro, and that this is the guy who captured him, kind of initially, and was kind of he was on Semdak's kind of prison ship, so there's that kind of rivalry there. So I suppose, Greg, do you have any thoughts on if they'll do anything or what you think they'll do with Semdak going forward?
Yeah, no, I definitely can see them bringing him back. I mean, I don't know. It seemed, when they shot him out into space, like it seems like it would be the perfect thing to sort of bring him back in some way. I mean, I definitely can see that working into Shiro's sort of plot line, just because he seems to have a lot of issues there, and that could be something that, he could overcome. So I definitely can see it as something that can sort of help them. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I definitely see it as something that can come back later on, just as far as just another villain character that can sort of help them, sort of overcome his, fears or whatever.
And Kelly, any thoughts on Semdak as a kind of lingering plot point?
Yeah, he could definitely come back, but I'll be honest, when I watched that, I just thought he was dead. Like my mind was like, well, he ain't gonna survive that because he's not connected to the life force anymore thing, and he's just floating around in space. So I thought that was just like confirmation that he died, but maybe he landed on a planet. He could have landed on a planet and survived because the thing was strong enough to not crush him, I guess. Uh, yeah, I don't know what they were gonna do. I don't know what they'll do with it. Like you said, maybe it'll be interesting if one of them lands on a planet with him on it, like he happens to be on it. But billions of billions of planets of the universe. The odds of that would be quite immense. But it's a show, so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. But I thought he was dead. I would be surprised if he was just dead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just to me, I don't think he's dead just because it seems like such a weird way to kill him that like
True.
Shiro in like a panic pressed this button and just killed him.
That's kind of what I thought made it powerful, though. Like when I was watching it, like I know it's kind of weird, but like they cut to a shot of Shiro like with the lights going red because the castle's under attack or whatever, or like freaking out, like of him like really petrified that he had just done that, like that he got rid of the thing that they needed the most to figure everything out based on his own fear. You know what I mean? And that like there was no way to get him back, kind of thing. Like I don't know. Like I could be completely wrong. He could definitely come back. It's just in my mind, I thought that was like a way of killing him. Even though, like you said, it is a little weird. I thought it was kind of a powerful moment for Shiro in a good way and a bad way. Like he got rid of the person that did that to him, but now to the detriment of their team because they no longer have a way to figure some things out.
I don't know. To me, they just seem to be setting him up as the villain who always comes back because he was the villain they defeated in the first episode, and he ended up surviving on the planet Eris and then snuck in. So they might do something, but yeah, it's just I think he might be just a character some people in the fandom might forget, so it's worth mentioning. So yeah, that's basically the end of the discussion. In terms of future Voltron podcasts, our plan right now is that we will probably next Sunday do some sort of a discussion about what news comes out from the Voltron panel at San Diego Comic-Con, which is on Thursday of the con, so it's actually not too far away at all, and we'll cover that because the panel says it will kind of like tease the future, kind of show off what's next for the Paladins. So to me, that has to be talking about story going forward, whether that be a trailer or something like that. So basically, like that podcast will happen as once there is something notable to talk about. If it's just like the most minor of hints as to what's going forward, we may not do it. But if there is anything, especially if there's a trailer, we will. And again, like there's some confusion about like how we usually have a recording time relatively early, and the Avatar panel is going to be the Sunday of the convention, so we may have to reorganize some stuff to do that. So it's going to be back and forth as to what exactly show we get out next week, but more than likely it will be Comic-Con stuff, probably covering the Voltron panel and the Avatar panel, but we'll have to wait and see, of course. So yeah, other than that, that's basically been the episode 1 of the Voltron Online podcast. If you have any questions or thoughts basically on the season, if you have any like potential corrections about stuff we've said, again, none of us I don't think are Voltron experts. There's probably people out there who are super familiar with the other shows in the Voltron universe and could add to a general understanding that we don't have with the universe. So definitely send them to us at the email address, which is avataronlinepodcast@gmail.com. But yeah, that's been the podcast. It's been myself, Greg, and Kelly. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.